Hyla, let's go ahead and start the meeting. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank the members, the BSCC members who are joining us today, as well as the staff, any people in the community who are joining us in the Zoom meeting. I want to say welcome and thank you. I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Hyla Gantan. I am a senior program associate with the Food in Prison Project at Impact Justice. I work across the country creating programs with various departments of corrections, also conducting research as well. I also have lived experience with incarceration, so I'm really excited to bring my general expertise to this discussion today, along with all of you, the work group members. And so we can start off by some roundtable introductions. First on my screen, I have Johnny Ortega.
Good morning. My name is Johnny Ortega. I'm a food service manager for Riverside County Probation. I've been with the department going on 19 years and have a military background in food service. And that's what I've been doing for almost 35 years. So,
Thank you and welcome. Next on my screen is Carrie Van Rokel.
Hi, I'm Carrie Van Rokel. I work at Stanislaus County Probation, and I've been here for 10 years. I also am active in the School Nutrition Association. I'm a school nutrition specialist as well, so I'm excited to be part here. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And next I have Marguerite Harris.
I'm Marguerite Harris. I'm the Chief Deputy, and I oversee our Juvenile Hall, our Coastal Valley Academy, and our SOAR, which is our Secure Track DJ Realignment Program. I've been in this position for since 2016, and I've been in probation for nearly 27 years.
Thanks, Marguerite. Nice seeing you again. And next I have Xochitl Larios.
Hi, good morning, members of the public and nutrition work group members. My name is Xochitl Larios. I am representing Alameda County. I've been working as a youth justice coordinator. I've been working with our young people here in our juvenile justice center for about 5 years, and I'm also formerly incarcerated as well. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Xochitl. And next I have Laura Stadler.
Hi, everyone. Laura Stadler. I'm work at the New York City Department of Health and oversee the New York City food standards, which are required evidence-based nutrient criteria for meals and snacks served by city agencies, including correctional facilities and juvenile detention facilities. Prior to working at Department of Health, I was a director of nutrition for the Administration for Children's Services in New York City and oversaw nutrition compliance and menu planning for the juvenile detention centers in New York City, and worked closely with youth one-on-one and in group settings there as well, and looking forward to our work together.
Thanks, Laura. Next, I have Jordan Warren.
Good morning. I'm Jordan Warren. I'm the chef for Freedom for Youth. I work closely with kids, and I'm also formerly incarcerated as a juvenile as well. And yeah, just happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Jordan. And lastly, we have Meredith Disotels.
Hi, good morning. I'm Meredith Disotels. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a directing attorney with the youth.
Thanks, Meredith. And we have also, sorry about that, Helen Wong joining us. Helen, you're on mute.
Sorry, muted myself. Good morning, everybody. I'm Helen Wong. I'm with Orange County Sheriff Department. I've been with Orange County Sheriff for about 5 years, but I've been a dietitian for over 40 years, was food service manager, did consultations, and currently just recently did the inspections for the 11 facilities at San Diego County. So happy to be part of this group.
Thanks, Helen. And so now that we've learned about our nutrition work group members, I'd like to pass it off to our BSEC staff who's joining us this morning as well.
Good morning. My name is Shay Moliner, and I'm an FSO with the BSEC. Prior to that, I was with the Kern County Probation Department for 26 years, and 10 of those years I was a facility manager in the various institutions that we had.
Amanda, do you want to go next?
Good morning. My name is Amanda Ferreira. I'm the regulations analyst here. So if you've been getting emails from me and haven't seen my face, hi, nice to see you all.
Thanks, Amanda. And I see Lindsay on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay, and I'm part of the BSCC Regulations Revision and the rulemaking team.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Allison, you've joined us as well.
Hi, everybody. I tried to turn my camera on, but I'm here in the room, and my face is somewhere beyond this camera. I don't know why it's not working. I'm Allison Ganter. I'm with the Board of State and Community Corrections. I'm the Deputy Director for the Facility Standards and Operations Division, and our team does the inspections of the local detention facilities and also does these fantastic regulation revisions. And I'm happy to be here and really happy to have our team here and looking forward to the work you do today.
Thanks, Allison. And are there others in the BSCC boardroom that we may have missed?
Ginger.
Morning, everybody. I'm Ginger Wolf. I am a staff services manager with the FSO division, and I'm also part of our regulations revision team. Just want to say thank you for everyone being here today, and thank you, Hyla, for chairing this group.
Thanks, Ginger. And really, it is my pleasure to lead today's discussion. We do have some goals for the day, which include getting through Article 9 nutrition regulations. And really what we're going to be doing is looking for consensus among the nutrition work group. If there is a point where maybe we can't reach consensus, we can also bring it to the ESC members for the next meeting and allow them to maybe work through some of that. This meeting is not necessarily an opportunity for us to draft the language. We can surely ask the BSC staff for support, or if offline there's something that comes up and you want to make some suggestions, I'm sure that they're open to that as well. But just for allowing this session to flow and for us to get through the regulations, reaching consensus is number one, but we surely have some alternatives. Along those lines as well, we do have just one article to get through. I believe that there are only 8 regulations and we have all day. So, let's also be intentional with some of the recommendations that we are suggesting, keeping in mind those who are most impacted by these regulations as well, but also given our expertise and being able to contribute to that too. So at this time, I will go ahead and pass it back to Shay. We can talk about some housekeeping things.
Thank you, Hyla. A few of the housekeeping things we're going to go over is when you're speaking, please sure to be that your microphone is muted and speak directly into your microphone. And we'll give that reminder a couple of times during the day. Please remute yourself when you're not speaking. Today, we're going to be having lunch between 12 and 1 o'clock, and we'll also have a morning break and an afternoon break. A few notes about Zoom. We've changed how we will conduct public meetings on Zoom. We want to ensure that the meetings are organized, stay on track, and that members of the community have a fair opportunity to comment. People on Zoom will not be able to unmute themselves during the meeting anymore. The chat feature will only be used by BSCC staff to post messages and links throughout the meeting. If anyone has a question or would like to submit a written comment, please email regulations@bscc.ca.gov. When public comment begins, commenters will need to use the raise a hand feature or dial *9 if attending by phone. To join the public comment queue, when called upon to speak, you'll be asked to unmute your microphone. Amanda, could you go ahead and display the agenda? Great, thank you. Today, as Hyla said, is that we have all day to get through these regulations. And when going through this meeting, you can always refer back to the agenda as we go through. The purpose of this meeting is you guys are all subject matters who are going to be going through the Title 15, Article 9 recommendations for the ESC's consideration. The regulation revision process is once you guys as a work group is done drafting the proposed changes to the regulations, BSCC staff will review and weave the nutrition work group's proposed revisions into a larger document for the ESC. There is still quite a bit of work to do. The ESC will reconvene to discuss and approve your proposed revisions. We will go into detail about the next steps at the close of the meeting. I want to remind everyone while going through the regulations is what is driving the revision? Is it legislative change or is it best practice? What will be the operational impact? How can this be implemented? And can it be operationalized? What will be the fiscal impact? Can BSCC inspect for this? And that not everything needs to be in regulations. They may be already covered elsewhere. And regulations are not policy and procedure. They are frameworks for agencies to develop their own policy and procedures. They are performance-based. We have a nutrition workgroup briefing materials booklet. As members, you were all provided with the briefing materials to prepare for this meeting. They're also available on our website. And then we will describe how to use these materials throughout the meeting a bit later before we actually get into the work. For public comment, there are going to be 2 opportunities during this meeting. Once prior to the work group's review of Article 9 and again directly afterwards. I will provide details for public comment will be conducted before we open the first public comment. After the second public comment opportunity, we'll discuss next steps and we'll adjourn. Do any of you members have a question about the agenda? Okay, moving on to public comment. We will have the opportunity for public comment before and at the end of Article 9. Additionally, there will be opportunities for public comment throughout the regulation revision process, including when the ESC reviews Title 15 regulation revisions, when the ESC finalizes proposed revisions, when the BSCC board approves final revisions, and during the Office of Administrative Law 45-day public comment period. Public comment instructions. Thank you, Amanda, for posting that. The purpose of public comment is to seek input on decisions that are being made on the nutrition regulations. Please try and keep your comments focused on the work. Members and BSCC staff will not respond to public comments. We will take comments from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom attendees. At this time, there are no in-person people attending this meeting. Zoom, if anyone does come into the room, in-person attendees will complete a public comment card. They need to write clearly your name and indicate if you know exactly what topic of the regulation you'd like to comment on. And you'll submit this comment card to Lindsay, who's in the room. For Zoom attendees, when public comments are called for, click the raise hand in the Zoom webinar control. If you're participating by phone, dial *9. BSC staff members, Howie will add you to the queue. When it is your turn to speak, Howie will call your name and ask you to unmute your microphone. Your comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Affirming and not repeating what someone else's comment would be preferred. A countdown timer will be displayed as a visual aid for your comments. Please be mindful of the time you have remaining on your comment. You may always submit your comment in writing to regulations@bscc.ca.gov. Do any members have questions about public comment? At this time, we would like to open up for public comment. Is there any Zoom attendees interested in participating? Please raise your hand in the Zoom webinar controls.
We have a few hands.
Thank you, Howie.
We're going to start with Israel Salazar.
Good morning, muy buenos dias. My name is Israel Salazar Villa, co-convener of the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice. First and foremost, I want to thank each and all of you on this important work group. I want to acknowledge and appreciate you taking on this very important responsibility. Also want to encourage you to really, do our best to maximize and improve the living conditions. I know this is focused on nutrition. So most importantly, and especially where food is concerned, and minimize food and control food. And I just want to encourage y'all to really lead with your hearts. If you have children, imagine your children being in these horrible facilities under these horrible conditions and restrictions and being limited what they can and cannot eat. So again, I just want to encourage you to please lead with your hearts and do everything that we can to improve these conditions. And let's not, make excuses around fiscal impacts and this and that. We're well aware of the budgets that each county gets per SB 823 and other juvenile justice allocations. And honestly, it's that there's an abundance of resources. And I just encourage y'all to just really, really challenge yourselves and do the best, maximize these minimum standards. Thank you so much.
Okay, next we have AC Zoom Room.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Colin Ford with Fresh Lifelines for Youth. Good morning. Today I'd like to address the issue of daily calories, snacks, and also point systems and incentives related to food. First, I strongly recommend that this work group makes snacks available upon request in section 1460. You should never go hungry while in a locked facility. Oftentimes youth rely on snacks as the only familiar and reliable food available to them when the quality of meals is very low. Second, youth that fly have consistently shared that the meals they received were not large enough. I recommend increasing the minimum daily calories to align with the USDA recommendations, but also leave flexibility to account for individual needs. All youth are different and will have different needs around food and diet. For example, many youth and flies listening sessions shared that they were often hungry because they passed the time by working out and doing push-ups and needed more food and protein because of that. Last, I'd like to address food incentives. Youth of Fly have given actually some mixed feedback on food incentives and point systems. We had a really long conversation with some of our youth leaders last week about this and about whether these incentive systems that reward behavior with snacks are beneficial. Some youth viewed this as a good opportunity to receive food and liked that there were ways to earn something and be rewarded. Other youth have shared that the point system they experienced was a way to force compliance with ridiculous rules. Youth shared that they lost points for not walking in a single file line on the stairs, for talking to each other during meals, for bringing snacks back to their room, just to name a few of the reasons youth shared that they lost points. I recommend again that you update section 1460 to clarify the point incentive systems. One, make it clear that snacks should be available upon request and not used as a means of compliance. Point or incentive systems are much better suited for other benefits that aren't related to basic needs, such as home visits or opportunities to work in paid jobs, for example. Thank you for your time and for your important work on this issue today.
Okay, next we have Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nancy Juarez with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Thank you so much for taking the time to convene. I just want to uplift that this work group, the diversity on this work group, the lived experience on this work group. Sochi, Jordan, they both have experience working directly with young people. They are the representatives of the voices and the people who these regulations will affect. I'm so grateful that they're being centered in this conversation. So just want to, echo that they have the direct tie to the young people that these regulations will impact. And so I'm grateful that we're centering them. And then the chair of this work group, Hyla, I believe in the East Coast, you created a program where there's a direct connection to farmers, so that whatever extra food that farmers have, that we can bring that into facilities. You know, how do we reimagine this system? Food is at the core of growth. Food is healing, food is medicine. And so how do we incorporate that? We're in California, the agricultural capital, you know, so how do we start to reimagine and build those connections to the community, to farmers, to the Central Valley, and provide food that is not just, you know, oftentimes we're giving food to incarcerated people that we would not even give to animals. So just want to center reimagining the ways that we can do things. And Israel's right, there's an abundance of resources, especially with recent policy changes, SB 823. How do we use these resources to ensure that we're giving food, medicine, to young people to support their growth and reach their fullest potential? Thank you.
That is all in the Zoom.
Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to pass this back to Hyla for her to begin the process. Get into the work.
Thanks, Shay, and thank you all for your public comments this morning. So moving into the regulations, how we're going to actually accomplish our goals for today. So first, we're going to request feedback on each section of the regulation. As you can see in some of the materials, there are already some BSCC recommendations. So we as a work group will either accept or modify what is currently written there. And if we have some recommendations for any regulation, we can have an open discussion about that. As a reminder, let's try and be focused on the topic at hand. We're going to try as much as possible not to draft. I know that sometimes we're inspired a little bit in the moment, but we want to still make sure that we're pushing forward to reach all the regulations today. Also, while we're doing this, the staff who are here, the BSC staff, is going to be taking some notes and will also help to draft some proposed regulations based on the discussion and the analysis. There is an opportunity for work group members to provide the staff with draft language if consensus is met. There's also another reminder to avoid drafting in the meeting, so we can send it off after the meeting as well. And also just another reminder that not everything goes in these regulations. So we will go ahead and start with Article 9, Regulation 1460. So we'll do a quick overview of this regulation. Let's see. Amanda, would you be able to share that? Thank you.
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up for you.
Thanks, Amanda. So I'll just give a couple of minutes for us to read through this, maybe brush up on any notes that maybe we have taken as well, and then we'll start to address some of these already written recommendations and the public comments. Okay. So here we have some SYTF subcommittee recommendations. So the first being consider renaming the section from frequency of serving to mealtime. And then also the second recommendation is to provide food on demand. We don't have any BSCC revision recommendations. So do any members have any thoughts around the SYTF subcommittee recommendations?
Yeah, I have one comment on changing that section name to mealtime. I think sometimes that can be confusing and people think of the actual time that you'll be serving the food. So maybe meal service might be a better option. And I'm not sure what they mean by provide food on demand. Is that I don't know whether that would be operationally feasible for the kitchen if at any time food is requested, that they can just provide it.
Thanks, Helen. And then Marguerite, I also see your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with the operational impact regarding food on demand. That's pretty vague, and that pretty much would mean no matter how many kids are actually in a facility or program, that at any time they can demand something to eat. And that would be going against the whole, the whole idea is that 14 hours have passed about having a snack, after dinner and before bedtime, or even structured snacks during the day. For example, we don't have food on demand. However, we add in a extra snack time in the morning because sometimes kids, we can't force them to eat, and we provide a very large hot breakfast. But kids oftentimes will decline to eat breakfast because that's really not what they're used to, or they just don't feel like eating. So we provide a snack between 10 and 10:30 in the morning. And then our kids who are in our camp program get an additional snack after lunch, before dinner, in addition to the snack after dinner. So I think if you're going to start looking at what do you do with your own kids, with my kids, it wasn't like you get to eat all the time, anytime you want. There was, the appropriate amount of providing, nutritional snacks, and when that was going to be appropriate so that it doesn't ruin dinner or it doesn't ruin another meal. And we also have to understand too, is that I know it in my experience, a lot of these youth, food is nurturing, and it's also a controlling issue. That is something they can control. And currently we have kids who, for whatever happened is in their past, and it's and some trauma they've experienced, and we hear too, the hoarding or the stealing of food. And I think it's really important to create healthy relationships with food. And so I think this whole food on demand is not really creating a healthy relationship with food. Because I'm talking about specifically a healthy relationship. I'm not talking about the quality of food or the quantity of food, but I think food on demand is not going to be operationally have the ability to do that. And I don't think it's in the best interest of our kids.
Thanks, Marguerite. And Sochi, I see your hand up as well.
Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think for me, since I think my comment is on the food on demand, I think we can maybe word it a little different. Because when I think about food, are we talking about snacks? Are we talking about a hot meal? Are we talking about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I think we can be a little bit more clear when we mean like food on demand. And I think it should be provided for young people, especially if they're, I see that this section is including initial intake. And we don't know what a young person has been going through when they actually enter a juvenile justice facility. And I know that the facility takes, they have to meet with the physician, and they have to meet, and they have to go through a certain intake. And I think food should be offered to youth. And if that food is not sufficient enough for the young person, I think the young person should be able to request additional food upon their intake. And if we're talking about a young person in the institution itself, in the unit, or whatever the institution looks like for all facilities across the state, I think the young person should be able to have food if they're still hungry. Even if a juvenile unit has a fridge, there should be where young people can ask the juvenile institution officer, hey, I'm hungry, the food here wasn't good for me, or, you know, I had to decline it. I'll take a smaller portion of food. Can I go and get some food from the kitchen in the unit if the facilities do have that in hand? So those would just be like my comments. I'm thinking from a youth perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Sochi. And Johnny?
Yes, regarding the food shall be offered to youth at the time of initial intake. What we do at Riverside Probation is we have a dietitian that has created a cold sack lunch, and it's approved with the whole grain, all the components, and we have about 5 to 6. We have the duty officers, or the officers that are there in the 24-hour facility. We have an intake, maybe at 11 o'clock at night or after hours when our food service staff are gone, and we're basically providing that youth or youths, which we've never seen about 6 in the night unless there's a raid, but basically, it pretty much covers us 365 days of the year. So we have the dietitian approved sack dinner or sack lunch, you may say, and then it does help because we don't know, like one of the speakers said, we don't know where they're coming from, so we provide them quite a bit. It's a milk, a fruit, a sandwich, I believe a chip. I think it's like a chip. So yeah, it's almost like 5 components, and it is approved by the dietitian. So we're trying, even though when food service staff are not there, to follow guidelines, and that's how we are doing it. And in regards to the actual frequency of servings title, I think I agree. We got to be careful with the changes on how it's written, because this topic, can be misleading as meals served. So I'm okay with leaving it as is. It's all about the interpretation. As long as it's written, it's just a title. As long as the details within the sentence and the paragraph are specific, that's the titles of the group 1460 frequency of serving is not really critical. But one more last comment regarding just the word food. To be specific, because if we're going to say food shall be offered, I think we need to be specific of how much of the quantity, even if we would like to put a general calorie cap, even, since we're supposed to be following these 25, depending on the grade level, 9 through 12, is what we follow. We follow 2 regulations, the school nutrition program and the Title 15, so it's a little difficult. But for here, sake of Title 15, I think we should at least be specific so we can have a tracking of the calories of what are being consumed or offered. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Johnny. And back to Marguerite.
Yeah, I think in regards to the food upon entry, that is already part of a requirement that you are required to offer food to a youth once they are booked in. And not they already in Title 15, they don't have to wait to see medical or behavioral health to go to see that. So I just want to be clear that that's already in the regulations.
Thanks for that context. And Helen?
Yeah, just to add to the providing food on demand, like most people are saying, at initial intake, I know at Orange County Probation, they already receive basically a full meal. And then at the housing units, they have refrigerators where they do keep fruits and milk and bread and so forth. So sometimes breakfast items that have not been opened, that the youth have not consumed, they are actually taken back to the housing unit. So they have that as like a mid-morning snack if they need to, or mid-afternoon snacks. So those food are available to them. My experience have been that oftentimes the youth may claim they're hungry because they're not eating the food that's offered to them. And even the healthy snacks that are provided to them, they're not eating it because they want to eat something else. And that's why they're complaining that they're hungry. And I don't know whether food on demand is going to help that, because if we're still providing healthy food, it's probably something that they are still going to refuse.
Thanks, Helen. And Meredith?
Thanks, Kyla. I wanted to address a couple of items in this section. One is this issue of snacks on demand. I feel like the on demand, we're getting maybe distracted by like that seeming unworkable, when what I hear the folks from Fly saying is that they need to be able to access food throughout the day, because a constant complaint that we're hearing is that youth are hungry. And what I heard Marguerite say is that they're essentially offering food throughout the day. I heard a morning snack, an afternoon snack, and an after dinner snack. That sounds very close to what Colin was describing, Colin from Fly. And so I think rather than get too caught up on like the terminology of on demand or whatever, what seems very clear is that an ability to access food in between meals is crucial. If we have concerns about hoarding, I think that to the extent that that's a power struggle, it may be because there's fear and anxiety around hunger. And so instead, if we do something like it sounds like they do in San Luis Obispo, sounds like a really ideal practice of offering snacks between every meal, that may address that, and we don't have to worry about like the food relationship issue. So I really encourage that we open up snacks to be throughout the day the way they do in San Luis Obispo, and we could work on what that language might look like. The other issue I want to address that hasn't been brought up yet is around the hot meals. We did get feedback and community input from both ARC and Fly that the number of hot meals should be increased. I would like to see 3 hot meals a day. If the compromise needs to be at 2, I think we should have a requirement that dinner always be a hot meal. And I think we should set a maximum of cold meals per week so that there's not a daily cold meal. So something like at least 2 hot meals per day, no cold dinners, and a maximum of 5 cold meals per week, something like that. I would really encourage us to consider increasing the number of hot meals and putting some more guidelines around that. And then the last thing I'll say is about the title. Maybe instead of frequency of serving, which sounds a little maybe confusing, as folks have said, maybe it can just be meal and snack timing instead of meal time, which is maybe like a very specific thing. Just a suggestion for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. And Laura?
Thanks. Just quickly, recommendation on the title, maybe consider frequency of meals and snacks, just to, that might feel clearer. And then, and just seconding that snacks throughout the day would be sort of a normative way to have access to food.
Thanks, Laura. Marguerite?
Yeah, I think I'm going to address the hot meal issue. Again, looking back at what I did with my kids when they were in, elementary and junior high and high school, make them some, typically, if it wasn't something, they would have typically offered a hot breakfast and a dinner. But at lunchtime, I send them with a sack lunch. And so I think it's appropriate to go to the 2 hot meals a day. We've done that for years here, and I think if we can do it, because we don't have a kitchen, we don't do our own food. We have to get our food from the county honor farm, and then I think also you have to look at, if you are doing food from your local jail, you need to look at, like, they do staff meals. They don't just do, they have separate meals and menus. So we get the staff meals. So kids get staff meals for breakfast and for dinner, and both of them are hot. And then, I mean, like I said, we have to look at what is operational, but what is realistic. And I don't know how many kids, unless they're eating at school and they're getting a hot meal. If you're a parent that makes your kid a lunch that to take to school, it's not hot. So I think it's appropriate to have still, regular, a sack lunch with a sandwich and chips and a piece of fruit and, maybe something salty and sweet. But I think that's a traditional, normal way to have a kid eat during the day. So I think in regarding the public comment, I would be in support of going from 1 to 2. And then obviously, have something in there that depending on, sometimes there could be something going on that there be exceptions, but they'd have to be very specific regarding, any kind of operational issues of kitchen doesn't work or anything, kind of like now, or if there's special reason to actually, and you have to document why you'd have to just go back down to 1 hot meal for that day. But that would be my input. And I think it's realistic.
Thanks, Marguerite. Jordan?
Yeah, I just wanted to second, the what is it? The two hot meals a day. In the Santa Maria Juvenile Hall, there's only one, and there's no like access fridge or any type of like way to get food really. So I think like providing snacks like 2-3 times a day instead of just once, like that would be good. Cause yeah, like I just I know you're hungry like all day there, so yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks, Jordan. Sochi?
Yeah, thank you. My final comment, excuse me. Yeah, I definitely agree with Meredith is saying definitely about and my other nutrition work group member around increasing hot meals from at least 1 to 2. But then I would also end my comment by saying increase the number of minutes for consumption for each meal. I think that's reasonable, from going to 20 to 30 minutes. I don't think young people should be rushed to eat. And I know that when youth are released from their room into the dining room, they like to talk, they like to have a discussion. So I think and that really just helps the social impact within the unit. And then when it's rushed, you just feel a lot of anxiety. And even when I got out of juvenile hall, I started eating my food really rushed and I wasn't able to digest it properly. So I would also support that suggestion. And I don't think it's going to make any physical impact, operational impact either, because the minimum standards already requires young people to be so much out of their time, out of their room. And then really it's just gonna increase the number of young people being able to eat without feeling rushed. So that's for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sochi. Jordan, thanks your hand again.
Oh, did I? My bad. But that was an accident. But I do agree with that. Sorry. As far as being rushed, like there's times like a lot of the kids have to like toss their food. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's time over. You know what I mean? Like it's time to get back into the cell. So it's like, yeah, I agree with that. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Johnny?
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. I think we've been since 2005, since I've been working in food services, we've been providing a after breakfast snack before lunch, and it's been successful. It doesn't have to be, quite, big, but it's just the concept of them having something after and before lunch. We also do have, the after school snack because we follow the National School Lunch Program. So we're a little bit different. We're not just following one regulation. But we do have our calories capped at breakfast and lunch because we have to follow the dual regulation. But with that extra snack, every pretty much 2 hours before and after, it really does help. Yes, there is complaints still about the calories, but they're not talking about fully being hungry. They're just wishing that we can be more portions, but we're kind of capped at the school breakfast program we follow. So just want to throw this out there. I'm looking to see if our department could possibly remove the National School Lunch Program because of the calorie caps. And I'm not sure who's on here that is actually following dual regulations like we are, but San Bernardino County Probation has removed themselves as well as LA County Probation. And it's not that we're getting more calories as a whole day, it's within the actual meals. So we'll be able to give them a hot breakfast, a little more calories versus a smaller calories, because it really does start the youth off in a bad foot. But no, I just wanted to comment on the as well as the title. I think that was great. Frequency of meals and snacks. 2 hot meals. We've been doing that since pretty much 2005, with the exception of staffing or issues that are unforeseen. So having that comment would be great on there somehow. And then the 30-minute meal time. I think that's what we naturally do. We aim for, even though the regulation is 20, but having it on there as a standard and a minimum, I think is necessary. So that's it.
Thanks, Johnny. Carrie?
Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty. So, I agree back with providing food on demand. It needs a little more regulations as if it were to be added to the VSCC, requirements. It's a good thing to help, tide them over so there is no hunger, but at the same time, it needs to be regulated to prevent, and keep the nutrition in line for the youth to ensure they're still getting healthy food and their vitamins, their minerals, all their nutrition needs are still being met. So that way that stays all in line. Increasing the minimum number of meals from 1 to 2. It helps because we never changed it. The previous regulation before this last revision said 2 hot meals a day, and we never changed it. So I agree with the 2 hot meals a day. It does help because the kids are more fond of the hot meals and they intake more of the food. And so then I also, as far as the 20 to 30 minutes increase, I think it would be a good idea to add the timing of it isn't from when like the first youth comes out and gets served, but have the timing from when the last youth is served, to make sure all youth have the same amount of time, and that would ensure everybody has plenty of time to eat their food.
Thanks, Carrie. And Laura?
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to comment. I would support increasing the minimum number of hot meals to at least 2 per day. And then I have some questions just about the maximum number of hours between meals, and that language isn't very clear to me. Maybe this is I would assume that no more than 14 hours shall pass between meals overnight, but would want that clarified that that's not during the daytime. And would recommend language that meals are served at typical times for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I don't know if there's like a minimum number of hours or a maximum number of hours to specify between daytime meals, and then no more than 14 hours shall pass between meals overnight.
Thanks, Laura. Meredith?
Thank you. I agree with Laura's comments just now around clarifying that language. I think that would be really important. I also wanted to chime in on this point around how much time youth have to eat. I agree with others that it should be increased to 30. I think the wording here is just confusing because it does say actual consumption, as if the intention is like once you are in your seat, you should have at least 20 minutes. And I looked at the CDC study. What it says is that you should have 30 because 20 is the minimum like seat time you need to have a full meal. And so I actually think the CDC study supports increasing the number to 30. And so I just wanted to agree with my colleagues about that. It brings up another issue for me too, that we haven't talked about yet, which is this issue of silent meals. I have heard about this in multiple counties now where there is an imposition of silence during the meal. And I find that really concerning. I believe I've heard from public defenders it has happened in San Francisco. I think we were hearing from our community member Colin at Fly that maybe in some of the facilities where their youth have been, it's happened. And what the CDC study talks about is the importance of socialization during meal times. And I want us to think about, is there something some way to address that in here? It relates to the timing of the meal. It relates to a healthy, slow, sort of well-paced meal that you can eat some, talk some with your peers. I just think that it will help make the meal process like a normative experience in the day if we make sure that there's no silence imposed during mealtime.
Marguerite?
I agree with Meredith. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we say to kids that you can't speak during meals, because meals is not just about eating. It's about having appropriate interactions with kids and with your peers. And so, I think if we have just let institutions and have, some boundaries and guidelines, but that should be part of your policy and procedure. You're not allowing kids to yell across the room, or you're not allowing kids to cuss during or having inappropriate conversations, but that's just normal, appropriate expectations of a family meal, is that you're not going to be yelling at the table. You're not going to be, cussing or speaking in, having inappropriate conversations, but that's on us to monitor that. And, I will say that years ago that was, that started to creep and, into our institution. And I just said, no, we can't do this. This is ridiculous. We have to teach kids how to be appropriate during mealtime, how to have those appropriate conversations. And it's our job to monitor that and redirect the behavior, and set the example of what the expected behaviors are. But I think if we can word it in some way that it's, to remove the silent meal is ridiculous. So that's my perspective on that.
Thanks, Marguerite. And Meredith, thank you for bringing up that point. Would you be willing to maybe drop some language to be included within that second paragraph?
I'd be happy to, and Marguerite, I would love your collaboration on that. I don't know if this is the place to address that additional point raised by Colin from Fly around points, like point system. It sort of relates to this concern around like behavior control and the use of food access as a behavior sort of tool. Maybe they're separate issues. So I just wanted to raise that being something that we might want to find a place for as well. But I'm happy to specifically try to figure out if we could find some language like you described, Marguerite, around silence.
Thanks, Meredith. And Laura? Sorry, you're on mute.
sorry about that, about the last comment, the availability of snacks should not be used as discipline. And I don't know if that's in another regulation anywhere, but like availability of meals and snacks altogether should not be used as discipline. I would recommend including that language if it's not in a different regulation already.
Thanks, Laura. And to add to that as well, when Colin brought up the fact that the idea of incentives or a point system around food, having mixed reviews by youth, I think that hearing from Colin that points can be taken away definitely talks about that kind of like disciplinary approach. Whereas, if we're trying to reward the youth by offering them food, it could also be used as a form of punishment. And so really just trying to be mindful and stay away from that kind of outlook. Carrie, I see your hand up.
That was along the lines of my same comment, is to add the wording, it should not be used as discipline nor as rewards, because it can go both ways, but it also is teaching them poor eating habits of using food as a mood stabilizer, as like rewarding. There's many non-food rewards or incentives or behavior modifications for in a positive way. And it would just feed food insecurities if food is used either way as a reward or a discipline. So by taking that off and not having that allowed, that helps food become more stable in the youth's lives.
Thanks for that, Carrie. Marguerite?
I think I agree that we can't use meals or snacks that are structured snacks as rewards or as discipline. The reality is kids are motivated by additional special food. And we use a behavioral management system here that's called Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. And even our most challenging youth with behavior get their scans that are all electronic, and then it's a token economy in that way that they can turn those in. And we actually have to and we do it twice a week, so it really does help with additional school behavior, because they can also buy more time on like getting music during the day, during class time. And so I don't want to say that that's a different section of Title 15. That's going to be disciplinary and any kind of behavioral management systems. I think taking away the ability to have a commissary, just like they do in any institution, is that if you put money on a books, you buy special food. And that is in addition to these snacks and meals. And because we're not giving Gatorade at a mealtime or a snack time, but twice a week, a kid may get a Gatorade, but they're not getting a Gatorade every single day. So that's a special thing that it really is an incentive for them to say, hey, I've got all these scans that I want to use to purchase that special item. It's just like a kid that goes after school and they're like, I remember being, in junior high and high school and like being able to go to the 7-Eleven after school and buy something that's a sweet treat or a salty treat that I could do. And I think that's the same idea, is to have those special things that are in place and using that. We also have, incentives like, better hygiene products, longer phone calls, or not longer phone calls now anymore, but longer showers. And so all these extra things we have, but I think it's also, we have to put kind of limits on what kids can get for snacks, in the additional snacks for the commissary. But I think it's an important thing, because I think it's special. They like having those, Takis that you're not going to get every day. Or, like I said, or, pieces of candy or the special things. So I think, that's a normal thing for a kid to be able to go buy after school. And so I think I'd like to keep that in it and understand that's a different portion of Title 15. I think we have to stick here with, you can't take away those scheduled snacks or take away a hot meal. Those are going to be separate issues.
Thanks, Marguerite. Laura?
Yeah, I wanted to, I think, reiterate what Marguerite was saying, that the availability of like the regularly scheduled meals and snacks should not be used as discipline. And I don't know. I think the use of food as a reward is super complicated and can clearly be like positive or negative, but can help take some of the pressure off of having all these institutional meals. That it's not normal to have a dietitian planned and approved menu, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And so I think there might be. I think it's great when there can fit in some outside food also. But I don't. But I would want it to be done in a way that feels like it's positive for the whole community and for all of the kids. So I don't think that. I think that's beyond the scope of this article. But would just want to say that the regularly scheduled meals and snacks should not be used as discipline.
Thanks, Laura. I did have a question for Johnny. You mentioned the use of NSLP. Are you familiar as to whether all counties across the state are implementing NSLP standards? And if so, would it be appropriate to maybe define what a snack is in this set of regulations?
No, it's all optional. When you have an agency such as Riverside Probation ourselves, looking for funds, reimbursement, that's what it is. They have to be eligible. We have to follow the guidelines for Title 15 and the school breakfast program. I do not think it's necessary to put any language at all in here about that, because that would restrict a lot of agencies or juvenile halls and treatment centers. But definitely we're actually looking to remove ourselves, because it just is very hard to have a 600-calorie breakfast and then go to a 900 lunch and then a dinner have maybe 1,000, and then the snack, we're like left with very little calories. We're trying to maximize the 3,000 calorie cap. And so that's where the National School Lunch Program that I was referring to, and the school breakfast program and the after school snack program that we are following, we're seeing our population of youth, they're not eligible, because if they graduated high school earlier before the age of 18, we can't claim them. And if you have decided that you don't want to go to school, we're not going to claim that meal. If you reach the age of 21, you're not, which we do have some youth in our facilities, we can't claim them. So they have to be pursuing high school. So I just wanted to highlight this, that it's very difficult. And that's why we're looking to remove ourselves from it. So yeah, the language should not be at all in Title 15. And did you have any other questions?
Yeah, a follow-up to that then, because you mentioned the reimbursement aspect of NSLP. So if a county chooses to remove themselves from participating with NSLP, would there be those fiscal implications then for providing the youth with healthy adequate food?
So our reimbursement, I'll share it, out of the 3 facilities combined, is only 280,000. But to actually follow the National School Lunch Program, school breakfast program, after school snack program, is probably a good 200 more grand, because of the type of components we have to follow. So it's not, we're almost chasing the dollar to get 50 cents. I know it sounds silly, but basically it was established before I was here as a food service manager. But we have to recuperate the 300,000 somehow, because it's just coming to these regulations with the sodium, it's getting harder for the youth. Meals, it's becoming more home style cooking, which is outstanding if you have staff, which we encourage all of our cooks at our facilities to, follow the menus as scratch cooking, but pre-made whole grain equivalency meal components, it's getting more difficult. And the manufacturers are putting all this type of food in there, ingredients, and the sodium is going outrageous, and then it's either the sugar. So it honestly, Title 15, how it's written, I went through all the attachments and I saw the comments and I put my notes down and I saw that there's some very good valid recommendations to make some edits. But I think Title 15 is here on this committee and the colleagues here. I think we have a really important task, and I think it's going to help whoever's watching this video, or even just if we can echo it throughout the state, because it's National School Lunch Program sounds amazing because that's what the K through 12, but it is a money. It's about the money, and we want our healthy meals for our kids. But this Title 15 um, regulation is healthy. So healthy meals, healthy menus doesn't necessarily have to be National School Lunch Program. So that's why I think it's really important for if you really want that money, you better be following the eligibility, because reimbursement, you're going to get audited. So there's a lot of guidelines you have to follow, and there's a lot of people putting their hands in this audit, as well as every month accountants and so on. So I know I went off on a different note, but I just wanted to explain how difficult it is to follow.
No, thanks for that context. And Helen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, we're here at Orange County. We also follow the National School Lunch School Breakfast Program along with Title 15. And I agree with Johnny that it is very challenging because we have to limit our breakfast, limit our lunch. The sodium level is much more restrictive. You've got the different colored vegetables and so forth. And it makes for a larger dinner that we have to provide in order to satisfy Title 15 calories. So it definitely is challenging, but I don't think any of the National School Lunch or School Breakfast Program guidelines need to be reflected in Title 15. I think we need to maintain Title 15 with a broader general guideline, because each facility obviously have different restrictions or limitations they deal with. And we need to ensure that Title 15 allows for those flexibilities within there. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks. And I have a follow-up question for you, Helen. What are some of those facility-specific things that we should be keeping in mind as we're writing these very general regulations?
I know that, we opted for the 2 hot meals, which I think it's a great idea. Which is fine. But I know some people mentioned like 3 hot meals, then we have to keep in mind that for some facilities, operationally, that may not be feasible. Not all facilities have kitchens that they're able to cook from scratch. So we need to keep that in mind. And then also, even with the snacks, like not all facilities may have refrigerations in their housing units that they can keep snacks available in there. And so they have to rely on the kitchen providing it. So when you're requesting snacks or food on demand, then that becomes an operational challenge, especially if it's after hours. So we have to be careful when we put the wordings in there to not be too restrictive, as well-meaning as it may be.
Thanks, Helen. Marguerite?
I just want to kind of add to what was just being said about the school lunch program. It sounds great, but it is a situation that it kind of goes after trying to get the money to supplement what we have. And when we used to have a functional industrial kitchen where we did all our own meals, and we did the school lunch program, and it was so incredibly difficult to follow all those mandates that once we went away from it, and it became kind of a nightmare in that way. And so we actually exceed. I'm constantly battling my nurses because our kids gain too much weight. So we're not on that spectrum of kids really saying they're starving. But yeah, the school lunch, I just want to reiterate, it may sound really good, but it's not always the best situation.
Thanks, Marguerite. Sochi?
Yeah, thank you. I also agree with my colleagues. I would also just add under how will BSCC measure compliance with the revision. I hear about vendors and the flexibility of the facility meeting Title 15 revisions and regulations. I think BSCC should provide some type of guidance because there are facilities that vendors don't want to apply. And vendors, you know, if we're changing it to hot meals, how are we also holding our vendors accountability with love and just showing that this is what the young people are really asking for. And I know if we look at the grievances across the state, are the number one thing that's being talked about is about the quantity and the quality of the food. What does it taste like? Is it seasoned? Is it fresh? And I know that according to the USDA Food and Nutrition Service under the US Department of Agriculture, it really states healthy snacking with my plate. So are vendors meeting that requirement? If they're not, what is the state going to do to support our facilities to make sure that young people are also getting fresh snacks on top of the two hot meals that, as my colleague said, like some facilities don't have kitchens and sometimes it has to be reheated. So just trying to be more flexible so we can really meet the youth's needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sochi. All right, are there any other last comments on this section? Yeah, Meredith.
Going to offer, because I see Amanda adding in some language, it's really helpful to see it on the screen. Maybe after this point about disciplinary measures, we could include a sentence that says silence shall not be required or enforced during meals, something like that. Hopefully that gets to the issue.
Thanks, Meredith. And Laura?
Yeah, just it is helpful seeing that language. Would just recommend that the language for that you shall not be deprived of meals and snacks as a disciplinary measure also includes something that like what's offered also isn't that even if it's not deprived, that like the option that's available isn't different as a disciplinary measure. So if everyone's receiving a hot meal, you know, a cold meal isn't the disciplinary measure or something.
Thanks, Laura. And Marguerite?
I think we somewhere in there we need to talk about suicide prevention because we've had kids who have actually, you know, used utensils or trays or, you know, situations where they harm themselves with those instruments. And I want to be really conscious of that because that's where behavioral health has to come in and work with us. Having been on duty during a suicide, that's something I'm not going to limit in any way or compromise. And so we do have to take into consideration that there are very, very rare situations where youth need to be on food that is, you know, either a safety spoon or, you know, finger food in that where they don't need utensils. And that really needs to be, you know, obviously it's not on for a period of time, but if a kid is on a suicide watch, and we all know that we don't have outpatient facilities in the state of California for kids, and it's very difficult to get these kids into inpatient situations. And so oftentimes that suicide prevention whole from start to finish and interventions and on a 55-85 hold often happens in a juvenile hall. And not because, you know, of what probation is wanting to do. It's just this is what we have to do. And we have to come up with robust suicide prevention interventions and preventions and 55-85 protocols in in connection and collaboration with our behavioral health. And we have to have somewhere in there and where if we have to modify not the caloric intake, but what a youth is eating for their own safety, to me, that is a higher priority. It doesn't mean they go hungry. It doesn't mean they're being consequenced. It just means we are putting things in place for their safety.
Thanks, Marguerite. And is this the section that you think that language would be best situated?
I think it just, if when we talk about youth can't be deprived of meals and snacks as disciplinary measures, I think I don't want to have any side of suicide intervention to be confused or seen as disciplinary, you know, because we do take measures that keep kids safe. So, you know, what kind of clothing we put in their room. And so maybe this would have to go into suicide prevention portion of our Title 15. But I just want to be clear here is that there are times, very, very rare, thank God, very rare, that we would have to do some modifications with what they're eating with, what they're eating on, and what is it they're eating. And, you know, because how can you eat certain things? So I think we just need to be cognizant of that.
Thank you, Marguerite. Johnny?
I don't think it fits here. I agree with the comment. I think it would be going into 1467, food serving and supervision. Definitely, we also provide finger foods, but it's really critical that it is on here in detail. We can't have the guessing or assumptions. It's an automatic response. It needs to be outlined and detailed of this is how it looks in regards to, for example, a paper tray, or we can even be a molded fiber or foam. It should be basically something non-sharp objects. You know, I actually, because you know, some of the plates are sharp, and that's why I think we serve our 3-compartment foam containers, so we can use some language to be specific as an example, not just say finger food shall be served. It should be outlined of what a finger food tray looks like. And that's the reason why I was saying under serving 1467, it probably would fit better there. And possibly, you know, since we were talking about the incentive part, I don't know if that would be the part where they rewards incentives. But there can be something in there because there's not a lot in there. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Johnny. So what I'm hearing from the previous comments is that it could fit, just depending on the wording, but then can also be shown in another section that may be more specific to safety for those who are under suicide watch. Oh, Laura, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe the language about the medical diets could also include diets that are, you know, modifications to meals to make them safe as needed, or I don't know, something could fit there.
Good comment. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Meredith?
I just had a process question in terms of edits, because it's great to see some of these on the screen, but I know some of the comments haven't made it in yet. Is there an effort to capture everything right now, or is there going to be some follow-up drafting? For example, I think there was some good consensus around increasing the number of snacks throughout the day, and just hasn't made it here yet.
Hi, Meredith. And thank you for asking the question. We were actually going to ask for a quick break after we finish the discussion on this item. We're going to do our very, very best to capture all of the drafting that we can. And obviously you can see that Amanda's got some notes. My eyes are terrible, so I can't see the words. But what we're trying to do is capture the concepts, if you will, if we're not getting it directly into the document. But we realize how helpful it is to be able to see what you're working on the screen. And then certainly, if there's anything that's not added, we'll send these around to the members after the meeting. But we're going to do our best to circle back before we close discussion and make sure we have whatever we can get in the draft, and then make a note if it's something we need to maybe wordsmith a little bit afterward. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Great, and thanks for answering that, Allison. Okay, if there are no other comments, I just want to make sure that we've addressed the public comments that were shown earlier. So increasing the number of hot meals, reducing the maximum number of hours between meals, increase the minimum number of minutes from 20 to 30, require snacks be available more often, which we just discussed, and that snacks should not be used as discipline. If we've reached consensus on this, I think that we're okay to move on to the next one, or take the break that Allison mentioned. So I see head nods. That's a good sign. Okay. Great.
Can we ask one clarifying question? I think, and Hyla, if it's okay, once we finish discussion on this, if we could just take a quick 5-minute break so we can put our heads together about capturing this. So we heard, and you reiterated that more frequent snacks. So it says a snack shall be provided to all youth between 2 to 4 hours after the dinner meal is served. Did we hear words that say a snack shall be provided or offered to all youth between meals? Was that what this group came up with, or were you suggesting something different? Or if you could clarify that for the more frequent snacks.
I did hear coming from the group about offering snacks between the scheduled meals. And Carrie, you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I like how it's between breakfast and lunch, and then between lunch and dinner. So maybe just a suggestion, between 2 and 4 hours between meals. But I know breakfast and lunch, it's maybe 4 hours. So maybe, between 2 to 4 hours after each main meal is served, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That way they have the meal in between every meal. That's just a suggestion.
Thanks, Carrie.
I have a question. So a snack should be provided to all youth between 2 to 4 hours after the dinner meal is served. If we're adding something 2 to 4 hours after the breakfast meal is served, like Marguerite mentioned, if her youth are in camps, they get that extra snack. How does that affect during school versus non-school days? Would that need to be specified during non-school days or things like that?
Marguerite?
I can only speak to what we do here, and that is that kids go to school in the morning. They do their hours of school, and I don't know about y'all, but when I was a kid, I needed a recess or a break, and so we schedule in a break. At kind of halfway through school, we have breakfast at 7 in the morning, and then that it's the longest time between breakfast and lunch, and then we have lunch at about 12:30, but then we have dinner again at about 5:15, 5:30. So we have that right in between. We have that break. It's good for the kids to take a little mental break. They can kind of take a breath. They can talk to their peers, in the classroom, and then they eat their snack. And then once we're back into getting back into school, they still have their snack there that they can actually continue to, if it's juice or something, they can continue to drink. So, and then on the weekends, it's just built into the day. So, you have in the morning, same time, because breakfast meals, at least in our facility, meals are the same time 7 days a week. And so I think having those scheduled breaks and snacks, it's something kids can, count on, and they need that to know that's going to be happening and it's not going to be kind of floating. So I would encourage that really should be scheduled in so that it minimizes that anxiety of when am I going to get my next snack or food or any kind of bit of food.
Thanks, Marguerite. Carrie?
We also have a snack break in between this morning school session, and then we also have an afternoon break too. So usually, like right after school ends at 2:30, and then their break is 10:30 to 11. And so there's also in periods of breaks for them, which would fit right in operationally on when they would receive a snack every day. As well as I'm agreeing, whether it's school or non-school, it is helpful to be consistent with making sure they have that food every single day. It's also good for their bodies to have regularly scheduled meals as well.
Thank you. One other question I have regarding the disciplinary measure, because it was brought up. Our existing regulation, section 1390, is discipline, and this is what was being referred to for those who haven't seen this other section. It lists out everything that youth should not be deprived of. So there was some mention that maybe it should be added to this section, meal and snacks, or do you all still prefer it to be called out within section 1460, have it in two places?
I'll go ahead and answer that. So I think it should be listed in both, because as our focus for food, we're going to focus on food. And when I search for Title 15 and follow these regulations, I'm literally only looking at these regulations. Sometimes it is redundant, repetitive, but it's necessary. Simple fact is just the example. I follow two regulations and I try to hone in. And it would possibly be an oversight if it's in another area pertaining food.
Thank you.
I would also agree. Oh, and Meredith?
Yes, I was just going to second that. As long as it's consistent, I don't see a reason not to include it, just for making sure it gets on the radar of the right folks. I do think that it would be helpful to clarify a little more what we're saying about snacks, because I did think I heard from Mr. Ortega and others that there was an after school snack. So trying to clarify, I thought I had heard like essentially 3 snack times throughout the day. The after dinner snack sounds very important when dinners are pretty early. So I realize that timing might be off depending on how early a facility serves dinner to have a snack in between lunch and dinner. But I do recognize that we have this recommendation from our SYTF subcommittee. That is a very expert group of folks, and they're suggesting food on demand. And it seemed to me that having a snack time between every meal or after every meal is, it was suggested, is sort of the closest that we're maybe reaching to getting to that kind of a recommendation.
Thanks, Meredith. A follow-up question regarding the after-school snack. Johnny, is that only if counties are like using the NSLP, or is that anywhere?
So we do a mid-morning snack, which is an after breakfast snack, and it's not on our menu. It's obviously in the calories for Title 15, but when we're following the National School Lunch Program, they don't want to see that on there because the calorie cap at breakfast and lunch, that's the school breakfast program. So that's how we're able to not necessarily get away, but be in compliance with both regulations. So we serve it 2 hours after the breakfast meal. And then the after school snack, again, same thing applies. We cannot attach it to the lunch meal. It has to be after lunch, which is after school snack, 2 hours after the lunch meal, which is also, you don't want it to be attaching to the dinner calories. So that's why we do it for our facilities is 3 hours before. So to better write how it should read, I think we should probably write it as 2 hours after breakfast meal, the snack, and 2 hours after lunch. Or we can put a 2 to 3. It just depends. I think 2 to 4 is a little too long, specifically for the interfering with regulations. So for my example, is I couldn't do 2 to 4. So I don't know if that's capping, but either way, the minimum is 2, and that's the focus. And so the last part I wanted to add was the after school, I'm sorry, excuse me, the dinner snack. So I'm looking at the 14 hours passing between meal, and I saw some of the comments that I read in the attachments that state they want an 8 hour period instead of the 14 hour. Well, the word meals is what it's written here. And I don't know if that should be accurate, because if you're serving a dinner at 5 o'clock at night, and then you're serving an 8 o'clock breakfast, and I don't know how everybody else has it, their school districts with the school times, because that's our biggest challenge, is that we have to serve them earlier because it interferes with school. Well, the 14-hour window is literally from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. And so having it actually earlier, meaning less hours, is just not feasible. And that's where I'm adding this comment is maybe we should remove the word or add an additional word of saying between meals and snack, because I rely on the last thing that we put in our youth's body, is the dinner snack. So it kind of helps us, because it's not like we're just serving the meal and that's it. It really does help to specify, because we are providing them a PM snack after dinner, and it should be a part of those hours that they have had some calories in their body, which was food. That's it.
Thanks, Johnny. Carrie?
We also do the school lunch and snack program, and we actually do our snack after dinner. And we complement it with a supplemental educational activity. And so we're able to use that as our after school snack, even though it's after dinner. So that's how we operate it. But I also wanted to bring out the wording in the federal performance-based attention standards. It has a great way of wording it. It says no more than 14 hours pass between the service of the last meal, and then we could put snack served and breakfast. And then that way that can show that it's the last meal of the day and then the next day's meal. That's the way the federal guidelines are written.
Thanks, Carrie. Sochi?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all my other colleagues. The only thing again that I will bring up is I'm not sure if this would be added on here or like another portion of the regulations, like on definitions around snacks. I know that the Youth Bill of Rights talks about youth have the right to eat healthy food and snacks. And I know that, but I'll mention again, maybe we can add a fresh snack where a young person, when there is those breaks, that they can all do like some team building and creating like a snack that's not just the peanut butter and jelly, but also educational for young people upon that will be beneficial and rehabilitative for upon their reentry. I know that it was really important for me when I was in juvenile hall to know how to do a healthy snack, because when you get out, life doesn't get easier, it actually gets harder. And the USDA Food and Nutrition Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually talks about healthy snacking with my plate. And it talks about like doing it in a group setting, the youth having the choice to do it. So I don't know if it makes sense, like I said, if it's where we at it here, where it's a fresh snack or what kind of snack that's not packaged. Thank you.
Thanks, Sochi. Meredith?
Thank you. Similar to Sochi, I have a concern about the definition of what constitutes a snack, and I would really hesitate and about allowing snacks to be a new time marker for the 14 hours. And I think I would just have to really push back and say that is not workable. I'm looking at a Fresno Juvenile Justice Center menu, and their evening snack is raisins. Any dried fruit is essentially a sugar rush, and that's it. You can't eat dinner at 5, have a few raisins at 7, and then allow 14 hours to pass from there. So either we would need to deal with what constitutes a snack and make that, especially the after dinner snack, and make that more robust, or I would really say leaving snacks out of that 14-hour measurement.
Thanks, Meredith. Laura?
Yeah, I second what Meredith said. I had concerns about the snack being the start of the 14-hour timer. I think it should be based on the from meal to meal and be specified that it's like overnight or somehow indicating that it's like not between breakfast and lunch. And yeah, and then just like sensitive to the sort of like facility logistic concerns of like specifying the amount of time that the snack needs to be provided in between meals, and like wanting to make sure that that regulation is flexible for facilities to have a policy that works to serve a snack between breakfast and lunch and between lunch and dinner, and of course after dinner.
Thanks, Laura. Marguerite?
Yeah, Laura just said what I was going to say is not to have a specific 2-hour timeline, because understand too is that, facilities have certain times breakfast may be coming in, but there's also a requirement now that you can't start school before 8:30 in the morning. And so if you're eating at 7 in the morning, that means snack time is going to be, you have to give a snack by 9 in the morning, and school just started, and that could interrupt some things and then not be really good for, really breaking up a school day to have a snack, halfway through that school day and before lunch. And so I think, if you kept it in a way that was in between meals, with some caveat of, restriction, because what we don't want to do is also get into, oh, they're going to serve their snack with their lunch that, or 5 minutes, 10 minutes before the lunch. We don't want that. But I think, a 2 to 4 hour, because for us, or 2 to 3 hours, I just think, again, giving some flexibility for when we can do that, because it, depending on our schedule, if you put a restriction, that could actually not be beneficial to the kids.
A follow-up to that, Marguerite, you mentioned about not wanting to ultimately serve the snack with a meal. Is that something that should be included in the language as well?
I think that is important, because what you don't want is just the snack should be between meals and not become part of a meal.
Thanks, Marguerite. And Johnny?
Yeah, we actually send our snack with the breakfast and the lunch and the dinner. And what we have often seen, and this is controlled by kitchen staff, but the officers receiving the tray, food carts, that's labeled and whatnot, but I think it should be on here, definitely written, shall not be served, because it has happened and we have had to correct it. We always have a new officers, there's a training involved, orientation. But yeah, this would be helpful because it's written here and it has happened. And just to go back on the National School Lunch Program that we follow, again, it's very difficult. And the reason why I want to bring this part up about the 14 hours passed between the meals and snacks is I saw in some of the comments recommendations for a shorter hours. I don't think anybody's mentioned any comments on that. Because right now it says 14 hours passed between meals. And that's the only reason why I was saying if we're going to reduce the hours 14, that's why I was saying, well, maybe we should consider adding the language of snack on there. Does anybody in here agree to shorten the 14 hours? Because if so, that's where I would like to put the word snack, and whether it be the starting point from the snacks served to the breakfast meal. If we have a shorter window, as long as we are issuing out the meals and we have proof of serving the meals and snacks. And if we have this language where we're writing 3 snacks, 3 meals, that time window should work no matter what. But I did see somebody wanted an 8-hour window, and I think that's not feasible. But I just wanted to throw that out there as a discussion.
Marguerite?
I agree. I think 8 hours, that's cutting into their sleep. And I think we do have to look at if facilities are eating between 5 and 6, if you even put it at 12 hours, well, now you're having them eat it between 5 and 6 in the morning. And that's cutting into their sleep. So I think, as much as we say, wow, 14 hours is a long time, it's, let's say they're eating at 5 p.m. Well, that means they need to be eating by 7 a.m. And that's adding in with, giving them a good amount of opportunity for sleep. And that's why we do need to put that snack in there in the evening. And no, I agree, it shouldn't just be raisins. And but I just think it's not feasible to say we're gonna get you up at 5 in the morning to eat breakfast. I think we do 14 hours, we do 5:30 and 7:30, and that's a reasonable amount of time, because then you think 7:30, then what's that break between then and lunch? And that's our biggest break, is that 5-hour time frame. And so then we do that snack there. The time frame in the from lunch to dinner is the shortest. So yeah, I think 8 hours completely unrealistic. I don't even think people. I mean, if you ask yourself, do you go longer than 8 hours without eating? I think most people do, from meals, and I think it's going to interrupt with how facilities be able to do their scheduling.
Marguerite. Johnny?
And I'm not sure if we want to get into this too much here, but meal times. Do we need to put a specific meal time on here that shall not exceed past because that will control and we will be within following those regulations. And I think if 6 p.m. is the cutoff, we'll always be within the 14-hour window. Or if it's 5:30, I know every operations are different. But one thing that is similar is the school start time that we have to follow, possibly, which is, I believe it is I think that's a standard across, the nation, but could be wrong. But I think it would be helpful because then we would specifically see meal times on here for the dinner to the breakfast. That would help that 14-hour language here.
Thanks, Johnny. And is it your impression that most counties are serving at the same time?
No, it's what I'm saying is, just like we're serving at 5, and I think Marguerite said 5:30. I mean, as long as we have that part where we can write down that dinner shall not be served past, or some language specifically stating that, even though it does say 14 hours, you know, just having that time, meal time, like shall not be served after or shall not pass is gonna naturally, you know, show that there's no exceptions. And it kind of helps for meal planning. I mean, for generally speaking, you know, it's 8 o'clock school start pretty much for K through 12 for the most part. You know, I know this is grades 9 through 12 is for what we follow for the National School Lunch Program, but I think it's safe to say that you know, the meals from dinner to breakfast, nobody should be eating breakfast after 8 because it's affecting their school time.
Thanks, Johnny. So I'm hearing putting some of those times in the regulations. Shay?
Kyla, can we just look at that one section so Amanda can kind of draft it? Because there's a lot of discussion on it. And so looking at the third paragraph where it starts, food shall be offered to youth at the time of initial intake, shall be served to youth if more than 14 hours pass between meals, and shall be served to youth on medical diets. Can we just focus on this one section so Amanda has an opportunity to draft it? Can you let her know what you see that needs to be in there so she can kind of write it out and then we can look at it?
Sure. So this first part here, there's been some suggestions to shorten the window. There's been some suggestions to indicate that this is specific to overnight so that there is no, I guess, lapsing like the breakfast time. And then also some suggestions to clearly write out to be served no later than X, you know, as it relates to each meal throughout the day. So I'm asking for the work group members, you know, which of these options would be in the best interest of the youth, and then also considering some of the operational information that we've heard from our facility staff. Carrie?
I think, prior to this, I pulled other nearby states too on operationals too, just to see what a national standard was. And a lot of their wordings is no more than 14 hours pass between the last meal served and breakfast. And then that way that doesn't address the snack, it counts from the meal to the breakfast. But then by not having a specific time, it allows every institution to run according to the programming that they need to fit in for the day, because there's a lot of programming that needs to fit for the youth. So by having a specific time, it might make the facility managers who run all the different programs, it might make it a more challenge for them. Keeping in mind, we're also adding that 30-minute, increasing it to 30 minutes for the youth too. So that's going to be an operational adjustment for the facilities as well to still fit in all the programming.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks for already having those examples in hand to reference. Are we okay with this added language? I don't see anyone opposed, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, great. Any other last comments on this section?
Did we work out the 2 to 4 hours? Is this breakfast, lunch, and dinner specification sufficient, or is there still some revision that needs to happen to this 2 to 4 hours in the last sentence?
I believe we heard that the 2 to 4 hour window would be helpful for facilities, just depending on the programming that's going on in the morning time. Carrie?
I believe it was discussed to maybe add in the snacks shall be served separate from a meal to prevent the snacks from being part of the meal.
Thanks for adding that. Okay. If there are no other comments on this section, Allison, I believe you said you wanted to take a breather after this one.
Yes, Hyla,
Okay.
can we take like a 10-minute break?
Yeah, sounds good. So if everyone can please come back at 11:02. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. That was a great discussion. One thing I do want to bring up as we resume, as you're going through these comments, trying to develop draft languages that you want to see to share with Amanda. So Amanda can actually have a chance to type it out. And what we want to do too is just kind of stay singular to one topic at a time. This way, she can make sure that she can put onto the actual working document your thoughts that you're trying to draft. And if you have an additional comment, to bring it up at a second time. So moving forward, just the request is to stay focused on a topic so that we could get it put down so that you guys can all see it. That way, as a group, you can come to consensus on what you see before you. You guys have any questions on that? All right, thank you. Thank you, Hyla.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, y'all were able to grab a quick bite, take a walk, take the dog out for a walk, something. But thank you, yes, for that previous discussion. I think we're off to a great start just with how much experience is in the room. It's really helpful to hear from everyone's perspectives. So just moving along, we're going to be looking at 1461, which is the minimum diet. Okay, thanks for putting on the screen, Amanda. So we'll just give a few minutes to kind of look over this review, maybe any notes that you've had, and then we'll look at some of the SYTF recommendations and then public comment. So just take a few minutes. All right, has everyone had a minute to kind of look that regulation over? Okay, great. So then just directing our attention towards the SYTF subcommittee recommendations, there are two listed here. The first being to increase food and calorie count for older youth, along with adding vegetarian and vegan meal preference options. The vegetarian and vegan meal preference options was also seen in the public comment below. The fourth bullet point under public comment, within the same section, there are recommendations that snacks should not be considered part of the minimum diet, providing better quality food, more snacks. And I think we did address that in the previous section. More specifically, separating dairy from protein and then separating fruit group from the vegetable group, as well as referencing the updated 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans as well. So I will go ahead and open it up for comments from the work group. Sochi.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely support increasing the calorie diet for young people. We know like the bill change, SB 23, young people are gonna be there locked up longer, and they're we have to keep in consideration their growth. And also, I know that the minimum standards requires a large muscle exercise, so you're actually burning calories. And again, I'm gonna reiterate this, just having a healthy option, and just clarifying what do we mean by snacks? If it's, are we talking about a hot snack, packaged snack, a fresh snack? And I would like us to meet the U.S. Department of Agriculture's request of having a healthy snack that also supports the Youth Bill of Rights, that the youth have the right to have option of healthy food and snack. I'm just not sure if we just change it, or what that would look like. And I don't think it's going to be in any significant impact to the facility. It actually will be better because they'll be more flexible.
Thanks, Sochi. Carrie?
As far as the calories, to start with that point, the calories currently say 2,500 not to exceed 3,000. And out of the dietary guidelines, the current ones from 20 to 25, sorry, just it will say, it says the calorie recommendation goes up to 3,200 calories. So to revise it to refer to the 2020, 2025 dietary guidelines would reflect the increase to 3,200 calories. And that's in reflection of the largest, if you look at the nutrition guidelines for the active youth, that's the top of the calorie count for an active youth with the amount of activity that the youth receive, including those large muscle activities in the facility.
Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate that. Laura?
Thanks. I've got several comments, but I'll try to keep them focused, sort of like one topic at a time. So in terms of the calories, I agree that they should be consistent with the updated dietary guidelines for Americans. And actually, those weren't the numbers. I'm pulling up the numbers that, for this age group. I guess it does go up to 3,200 calories. So I think that's okay, but and then I guess I will have other recommendations for each sort of like food group to support that number of calories. And then I just sort of have a comment overall that even if the planned menu is 3,200 calories, kids might not want to eat all of the different things that are on their plate. So that even if you're providing the right number of calories, you might still have kids who are going to be hungry after a meal. So I think drafting some language maybe at other points to talk about quality of food and like youth input on the meals is going to be really important to make sure that those 3,200 calories are ones that the kids feel good about eating.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Laura. Johnny?
Yeah, I echo that. 3,200 for sure. You know, with us following the National School Lunch Program, we have to have a wellness policy. So what we have is the registered dietitian virtually, because she cannot be at 3 sites sometimes at the same time. The youth actually build healthy salads. They're actually learning about the salads. They're consuming the salads. And then we would talk about beverages and it's the education part. I know that we're not really focusing on that at this time, but I just couldn't help but to hear that this is the part where it can reduce the waste if their kids are not liking the food and they're not getting those calories. And so just educating, it really does help. And them being a part of the meal planning, which is youth surveys. So every 6 months, we actually issue out surveys that are very detailed to help us write our menus that naturally reduce waste, provide youth input, and this has everything to do with the consumed amount of calories. So that's why it's not for this section, but it is because it's their involvement, it's their consumption, and we can't make everybody happy. But if we look at the tallies and the majority of the diverse groups and the facilities that are, one is 80 miles from each other and one's 50, you'll see that the waste is different. And I do agree the large muscle activities where if we were to, even if possible, increase that activities by 15 minutes, that could be possibly 50 to 100 calories, depending on what kind of activity. Therefore, I don't even know if it's possible to state that, as long as it's written policies and protocol, that we can provide an additional calories. So I just want to throw that out there, guys.
Thanks, Johnny. Amanda?
Okay, before, it sounds like we're moving on to another topic. Is there anybody who objects to increasing the calorie count to 3,200 before we move on to youth input? Meredith, you object to increasing to 3,200?
No, sorry. I just, I know this is hard because like before we move on to another topic, are we still on can we stay on calories for a second, or are we just focused on the maximum calories?
We can stay on calories in general. It just, we were
Okay.
starting to get over into youth
over,
input
yeah.
and meal planning. So I want to redirect us back to calories
Okay.
before we move on.
Great,
But I'm
yeah.
going to put a pin in the youth input on meals because I know that is a big one.
Yeah.
So, but before we get off calories topic, whether it be you disagree with this or there's something else regarding calories, if we could just stay there for just a minute.
Great, thank you. I guess I'm pausing on, like, I think it's great to increase the maximum. It sounds like that's aligned, but we're leaving the minimum, which seems problematic for, we have both males and females grouped together. And when I'm looking at the dietary guidelines, it looks like the minimum for males is not quite as low. And again, we're hearing a lot of feedback from many different places that youth feel hungry. And so addressing the minimum here seems really important. So I just wanted to put that back on the table and see if we can have some discussion about what that should look like. Male, female, and then pregnant youth. I think there are some dietary guidelines that we don't need pregnant youth to necessarily be set in a category where they need a doctor's approval, that we can raise the standards there for pregnant youth based on known minimums and guidelines. So I just wanted to bring that. And as part of this, I realize this is jumping around the section a little bit, but it looks like snacks are included in the calorie, sort of the way that that's assessed. And I wanted to put to the group whether it looks like we got some feedback that snacks should be outside of the calorie minimums and maximums. So I just wanted to put all those issues out there before we moved on.
What would you want to see the minimums changed to?
I am hoping Laura might have some resources coming from where she sits. And I'll put it back to the middle for a minute before I chime in.
Yeah, I can speak to it and welcome any other RDs to also jump in if there's other information that you're looking at. The New York City food standards require 2,000 to 2,200 calories per day and allow up to 2,500 calories per day for males in youth detention. And I know from personal experiences that we do have co-ed facilities, and it's not feasible for a whole host of reasons to offer different serving sizes to the male and female residents. So there's just that largest serving size gets followed. And so I would be curious to hear from folks here if that is similar to your experience, or if you're able to serve different quantities to across genders. And then just flagging that in the dietary guidelines for Americans, the recommended calorie level ranges for females ages 14 to 18 is 1,800 to 2,400 calories per day. So where we are right now with this calorie range of 2,500 to 3,200 is like above and beyond the dietary guideline recommendations for females.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is difficult to separate out and have different menus for the male and the female. So based on what we currently have right now, 2,500 to 3,200, I think that is a lot of calories for minors, even those that are, older, is a lot of calories. In fact, one of the issues I tend to deal with is coming from medical. They're complaining that there is an obesity epidemic, and the kids that are coming into the facilities are gaining weight, and they're actually trying to help them maintain their weight or even lose some of the weight if it's necessary. And one of the biggest complaint I have from medical is, can we lower the calories? So it's almost like the opposite of what some of the committee members in this group are addressing. But I think the 2,500 calories should be adequate as a minimum.
Thanks, Helen. Marguerite?
Yeah, and I know it may be, there's some, I think, louder minorities of what is actually happening in some of these facilities. I think I understand that some kids are likely saying they're hungry. Our kids will say that too, and they're gaining weight. In fact, the kids that are here longer, especially in our camp program, they're gaining too much weight, quite honestly, and that is a battle with our nurses and making sure their BMI is not going up, their blood pressure, their any kind of cholesterol levels. We keep we send kids out to get all that kind of testing, and we see kids here who are gaining a significant amount of weight the longer they're here. So I think there is again, when I said teaching kids healthy relationships with food, it is something they have control over. And we have pretty darn good food here in comparison to some other places, and it is definitely challenging. And just think you need to understand too is, we look at these guidelines, but what are we doing about the kids who are obese, who have BMIs that are way off the chart, who are coming in and really need to, are having some negative adverse medical conditions based on their weight. And I don't think it's, just necessarily increasing their activity. We have a lot of hours of things that we have to do each day. But it's about, it is sometimes the quantity of food and the type of food, because kids very naturally, we say, oh, provide healthy snacks. A lot of kids don't want healthy snacks. They want to have the chips. That's just being a teenager. Very rarely do we have someone, we offer salads to our camp kids every day. And sometimes they don't want that chef salad. They want something else that's, in their mind tastes better, is more attractive. So I think it's a difficult situation. It's a balancing act. But I do know there are youth who are gaining too much weight in facilities, whether people want to believe it or not.
Thanks, Marguerite. Helen?
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I don't know what happened.
No worries. Thanks. I did want to make a comment. I know that oftentimes we hear about people who are experiencing incarceration for longer periods of time, even if they are indigent and they're relying solely on the food that's provided to them. There are, higher rates of weight gain and obesity and things. So something I just do want to share with the group that there are other factors aside from calories that can contribute to weight gain, especially when people are experiencing traumatic events that can lead to toxic stress. And so I think that definitely, from Johnny's point about adding that educational component to food service or as part of programming, can really help to not only allow the youth to know what they're putting in their body, but also to support food service and what they're serving, right? I think that what I've heard in my work is that sometimes people just don't know. They just don't have access to the education when they're at home. Sometimes they're coming from food insecure communities. And so if they're understanding how the benefits of the certain food items that they're being served can actually support their physical fitness while inside, then that can help, impact consumption of the healthy foods that food service is really trying to provide. That was my little spiel. Thank you. Something other than the calories as well, I think that an increase in calories can help folks feel a little bit more full, but I think that also too there's value in, focusing on fiber and other like fresh, healthy foods to make sure that the young ones and even adults as well are experiencing, fullness. Satiety is a really hard thing to achieve while inside because you don't have that choice. So I just want to be mindful of that. While, we are trying to strive towards an increase in calories, there's also an element of food service providing more foods that actually fill you up and keep you feeling fuller for longer. If we're okay with this section here, okay, Meredith.
I was just gonna say, I do think like calorie quality, like the food quality is really crucial to this discussion. I continue to struggle with a minimum of 2,500 when the dietary guidelines say that an active 18-year-old male has a need of 3,200. So I think what we're trying to balance is, concerns about weight gain and concerns about hunger with a one-size-fits-all approach. And so I'm asking sort of to the group, you can have youth who are dealing with like high calorie needs in the same unit as youth who maybe need to like you had said, Hyla, like learn some more around like how their food choices impact their health. So what do we do with this one size fits all for males and females and pregnant youth, and a range that essentially allows for a below standard range for youth that it doesn't, it's not applicable to.
Great points, Meredith. Thank you. Jordan?
Hi. So I don't know if this is off topic, but as far as the caloric intake increasing or whatever, like would there be a way of maybe like implementing like more like outdoor activity like yard time? You know what I mean? Like to kind of like complement like that, or is that like, because I remember like we would probably only have yard time maybe once or twice a week, maybe. And sometimes we wouldn't, depending on like if anything were to like pop off in the unit, like sometimes we get locked down. So like, as far as that in like, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. If there was a way to like maybe like implement like exercise to complement the added calorie. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is you're trying to look for that balance. And I also
Yeah.
believe that yard time and things like programming, et cetera, is in another article as well. So I think that that would then be the most appropriate place for that. But Shay, can you speak on that a little bit?
Sorry, so to speak on regarding the daily activity that they're required an hour each day, large muscle activity. So youth are required every day to have large muscle activity. So it shouldn't be just 1 or 2 times a week. And and then they also have time for recreation, and oftentimes a lot of that recreation may be additional time outdoor, playing basketball or during different things. But I didn't want to like shift back, but I do kind of want to shift to multiple things that were said here about calories. It looks like we're looking at calories for pregnant people, calories for males, calories for females, and what we're looking at the regulation right now is very one size fits all. Does anyone have any draft language that they would like to provide that may actually address these issues? That they would like to share? Because right now we're looking at basically a minimum of 2,500 to not to exceed 3,200. But the issue is there's differences between adult male youth versus a 13-year-old male youth that you may have in the same population and a female. So does anyone have any language that they would share that might be able to address these issues? Or should we leave it just saying the minimum of 2,500 exceed 3,200, and then the next line kind of gives that flexibility for a diet to be adjusted specifically per youth based upon the facility manager, dietitian, food service manager, physician?
Jordan, did you want to respond to that? No. Carrie?
Yes, what we have done is we have used the language as it's stated there, because if we address specific individual needs, there's too many of them. So we use with the medical, and they monitor their weight. So if there's a weight issue, where the BMI is too high, or they're having, health complications due to a weight, the doctor may issue a specific calorie diet, and then we adjust that diet to that individual. Likewise, with the subsection 1, the pregnant youth gets extra food. She gets extra food per calories per meal, plus an extra milk every meal, plus a extra like a sack lunch in the evening as well. So there's extra calcium, and she gets all alternative things from the medical. So how we've been working with it is worked with the language as is, because it allows us to address each unique individual. If they need more calories, then we're able to adjust it per the medical doctor. And if there's a decrease, then and so forth. So that way we're able to adjust accordingly to what each specific youth might have needs for. And that's the language, the way it's been working for us has worked just well for us personally.
Carrie, Marguerite?
I think, kind of going along the lines of this, calorie increases with the exception of medical diet. I think calorie modifications, because it could be a situation where there may need to be a reduction, but just modification, because that gives the ability to go either direction.
Thanks, Marguerite. Johnny?
I'll agree with Carrie and Margaret, that, yeah, the language is written just like how we just modified it, to modifications. That works well. The dietitian, once we receive the notification of whether the youth is losing weight, gaining weight, we follow that order. And, that's why the flexibility, even though it says 25 to 3,200 here, if it's an 1,800, it'll be prescribed by the physician, and then the dietitian will create the plan. And that's the same thing with the pregnant youth. So I like how the language is already reading. It's the same thing. The dietitian will review the medical statement, if that's what it's called at your facility, and create the menu based off of that youth needs. So here it's kind of written for us, as it should. It's just more about the protocol at your facility and policy. If we want to be more specific, but I say if we be too specific, it's going to get lengthy. But that practice is the dietitian reviews and makes it based off of the BMI, or whatever the scenario may be for that youth medical diet. So that's all.
Johnny, Amanda.
Staying on the calories here, it sounds like Meredith's concern is obviously the youth complaints. Looking at that second sentence, do you think it would be empowering to youth to be part of this collaborative process if they feel they need their calories modified? Because they're left out of this decision making. Perhaps they'd feel like they had more say so over what they're consuming, and it's a collaborative process. If they're able to give that group feedback on what it is they believe they need, it also gives an opportunity for the staff to coach them on, healthy habits and things that Marguerite was mentioning. I don't know if that's feasible, but I'm wondering if including the youth in that process could help the situation.
Marguerite.
I think it's ideal. I don't think it's operationally feasible. That means if you have a population of 140 kids, then you're going to have 140 different input on an individual diet, which is just unrealistic. You have smaller populations, could be, but the reality is then you may have limitations on the food that's actually available. And so I think ideally, yeah, that'd be great. But I think when you try to put that in motion, I think that's very difficult. I think it's more about the programming you have. And we're required to do an hour of programming a day that is, more life skills, more evidence-based. And we have a cooking class, we have a gardening program. So where kids are learning about those things, and Johnny's saying about, how they've done some things. If you have a kitchen, kids can actually work in the kitchen. With CTE, there's going to be more programming that's going to be required to get those kind of things. So I think we can do that in those situations, those environments that's under a different section of Title 15. But when it comes to this situation, I think that would be just really create a lot of chaos in trying to, I think we can get input from, different youth voices as a whole, but to do individual meal plans, it's not going to be feasible.
So is the only way to initiate calorie modifications through, the dietitian or the physician? I, as a youth, couldn't initiate that process if I felt like my calories needed to be modified in any way. It would have to be like a physician notifies someone, or like, I guess as a youth, what would empower me to say, I don't think I'm getting enough, or I think I might be getting too much, other than a complaint, or is that the only option?
Well, we have case plans that are required to be done, on a regular basis. And although case plans are not required to include medical, ours do. And I think, we always get the input of medical, and get their, feeling on where that youth is at medically, if they're, how many sick calls they're trying to make, are they compliant with their medication, where are they at with their diet. We do situations where if kids do have eating disorders, where we have kids that, will actually go and purge after they eat. And so taking those into consideration, that's when you start including medical. And I think that's when you start using that institutional case plan that is required. Again, beyond what is here, it's those really specific, unique situations. This right here, I see as going as something that will affect every single youth, not individual youths.
Thank you.
Johnny?
I just wanted to notate that if we're getting youth involved, they have to be educated. And so it's a little difficult. And that's why under a different section here on Article 9, menus, if the group agrees, youth surveys shall be conducted annually, is what I would state. Nothing in pertaining calories, but just in menu planning. So I know that's off topic, but I just want to let you guys know that I think anything involving the calories, the youth should not be involved. But the menu itself, I don't have no objections to that. So that's it.
Thanks, Johnny. Sochi?
Yeah, thank you for all the input. I think for me, I didn't know that I was allergic to gluten or avocado, or certain specific things until I asked. And it made a difference in my diet. So youth can be uneducated, due to the school to prison pipeline and the home to prison pipeline. And I think when youth are in the hands of probation in a locked facility, the modification should include a young person and I think it's just simple modifications with the exception of a medical diet may occur as collaboratively determined by the facility manager, the youth, uh, foods, food service manager and physician. And it doesn't have to be for every single youth at this time. It can be for youth coming in, for youth that have questions about their diet. And I think it's when they request to see the the nurse goes to the unit right away. So I don't really see it as a huge operational impact.
Thanks, Sochi. So you're bringing up some like allergies, which could also be a part of medical diets. Because we're talking about the calorie section here, is that a discussion point you want to see when we move over to 1462?
Yeah, we could put that as a parking lot.
Okay, thank you. Meredith?
Thanks. I would support allowing, a collaborative determination that includes a youth for individualized planning as needed. I just I feel like we need to grapple with this point that a facility could across the board meet the minimum of 2,500 and be below what 18-year-olds who are moderately active are, what the dietary guidelines are. So as written, I think this would, put California's facilities out of step. And I think especially what we were hearing from the folks at Fly, and we also got this input from the Orange County Juvenile Justice Commission that youth are hungry. This especially around, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are working out, especially youth who've completed their high school diploma and their days are not as, full of high school educational programming. Working out is a good way to pass the time, and their protein needs, especially being higher. And so it's difficult because we don't have any connection between the calorie standard and the quality or the source. And like I said, looking at the Fresno County menu where there's a lot of crackers and dried fruit, which offer calories, but not, the nutrition you need for, if you're doing a lot of exercise. It just feels like this section as a whole is, falling short when it comes to connecting calories by age, by activity level, gender, and food groups.
Thanks, Meredith. Helen?
So yeah, I understand what Meredith is saying about the older youth who might be exercising a lot more. And actually your comment on the juvenile justice recommendations, they were addressing Orange County, and I actually I was part of that. I was working with them. And in our facilities, basically you have youth that are more sedentary than active, because even though they have activities, they really don't want to participate. And these are the same youth that have weight gain issues. So although they're complaining that they're hungry, they're actually just not eating the food because either they don't care for them or they don't like them, or they want a different type of food. But we offer a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. They get as their HS snack, like a whole sandwich and a milk. So they're getting a lot of very healthy snacks fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy products. They're not getting like a lot of crackers and grains and things like that. So for me, working within that 2,500 and 3,200 calories, it's a good range for me to work with because I can come up with a menu that is going to work for the majority of the youth that are in the facilities. And if there is a need to either lower a calorie or increase the calorie, the medical can get involved and they can write it up as such. They can either increase the calorie or they can increase a certain snacks and so forth. And also to comment on Sochil's earlier comment about possible allergies and not learning about, sensitivity to gluten and things like that. That's where I would very much like medical to be involved instead of the youth just coming to a food service manager or somebody is because they really don't know if that is truly a medical issue. It might be more involved. And if medical gets involved, they can actually run some tests or do more of an assessment to determine maybe there's more to it. And then they would be able to write the appropriate diet. So I'm actually happy with the wordings that everybody has changed right now, increasing it to the 3,200 calories as a max, and then changing caloric increases to caloric modifications. I kind of like it as it is right now.
Thanks, Helen. And just to kind of go back and reference the dietary guidelines for Americans, it does say that at a sedentary level of physical activity, 16 to 18, the lower end is actually 2,400 for males. So what is on the screen is a little bit higher. It may not be the best given the feedback that we've got from the community, but it is reaching the cap of 3,200, which is also reflected in the DGAs. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then Meredith, you did have a comment previously about this one size fits all calorie range. Is it your suggestion then to take the females and reference the DGA calories for the same 16 to 18 age group? Because that would then put them at 1,800 to 2,400.
I think aligning with the guidelines makes sense to me, but this is where I am not a nutrition expert. So I would, defer to others that are that have that expertise. With the problem being when you have a one size fits all, the best that can be inspected to is, are you meeting the minimum? So understanding that there may be some facilities that hold themselves just to the low end. And that means that in those facilities, they're not meeting the guidelines for the youth who aren't sedentary and are older.
Makes sense. Thank you, Meredith. Laura?
Yeah, I think it's so tricky, right? To have like a one size fits all when like there's so many individual needs to take into consideration. It's like such a struggle. So I think like one possible solution could be to have the regulations state that facilities provide the calorie level that represents the majority of their population. So if they have if the majority of their population is, 18-year-old males who are highly active, then that they're providing that 3,200 calories. But that if it's a younger population or a physically smaller population or a more female population, that then they're meeting the calorie needs for that population.
Thanks, Laura.
And then I don't know if there's some room for regulation, then if they're, if the if the menus are serving 2,400 calories a day and it's not appropriate, then I don't know if there's room for regulation there to say, no, you need to increase your calories. If that's how the system works.
Sochi?
I would also support that too, because if youth are denying food, BSCC's measures to make sure that the facility is in compliance, I think they should look into why youth are denying those foods and why the facility chooses to lean towards more of a lower end of the calorie intake. Because youth are saying that they're still hungry, and just because they're denying, that shouldn't be just on the youth. Like if it's like, a behavioral issue, I think it should be looked as an institutional issue, because there is vendors that only have a limited option of food. And then just to play with like the language a little bit, I had wrote something down to kind of support a little bit of Meredith's comment of like trying to think beyond a one size fits all. Um, we can have a minimum of 2,500 calories, but not limited to 3,200 for youth that are pregnant, high active youth that are doing LME and burning more calories, and young women as well. So that was just language that I was playing around with. Thank you.
Thanks, Sochi. Shay?
Well, as we're getting close to the noon hour, I just kind of wanted to kind of focus back because we have a lot of different thoughts regarding this first line about recommended daily calorie, but we haven't really come to a consensus yet. So as it stands, how the language currently looks that Amanda has done, is there a consensus that we should leave this as is with what she's written down, or does someone want to see a different language put here? Out of this group, just looking at how the language reads, do we want to keep it as currently drafted? Because it's very difficult to be able to address all these things that come up. But as a regulation, as a group, what do you guys see at this moment?
I'm in favor of leaving it as it's been modified already.
Thank you, Johnny. Carrie?
I second that as well. I'm along with leaving it as it's currently modified.
Jordan?
Yeah, same. I second that as well.
Helen?
Same here. I agree with leaving it the way it is written right now.
Marguerite?
Agreed, leave it as the modifications stand.
Okay. Does anyone else have a comment?
I'm assuming that the proposal is to keep Amanda's comment on the side around youth input going to the ESC.
That was going to be a follow-up question because it seems like there's two opposing views on that. So if that's something that we can't reach a consensus on, if that's something, you know, Hyla, Meredith, Marguerite, they're all on RESC. So this is something they'll have to mull over again with the remainder of the group if it is sent there. But it seems like this group's kind of split on whether youth should be involved and whether that be involving youth when feasible or not involving them at all. If that's something you want to try to reach a consensus on, great. If it's something you all want to just send to the ESC for them to determine, I can keep that note there.
So if we agree with the first part of that sentence under calories, recommended daily calories, leave that as it is. The second statement, which is calorie modifications with the exception of a medical diet may occur as collaboratively determined by the facility manager, dietitian, food service manager, physician, and then add the word and youth. Since you guys are split, we can maybe take a consensus vote right now because we haven't really heard from everyone. It looked like it was a 2-2. Two wanted to add the word and youth in there, and two did not want to add. But as a group, do you guys want to look at that and see if we want to add the word and youth to this section? Or add when or add and youth when feasible? And you want to type that in, Amanda, just to look at it? Amanda's going to type in the word. So looking at this section alone, how many people would like to adopt this language in the regulation? Or who's opposed? Sochi?
I would like to adopt that.
Meredith?
Same, also adopt.
Okay, Laura?
I think that works to adopt it. I have some questions about the earlier part of the sentence. It just doesn't read clearly to me that calorie modifications with the exception of a medical diet. Should it be calorie modifications and or exception for a medical diet? Like I don't, the language just isn't clear to me what the exception and for the medical diet refers to.
How would you like it to read? What would make sense to you? Yeah, so Allison, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Calorie modifications.
Including medical diet?
Including medical diet. Yeah. May occur. Yeah.
My question is just if they're included, and sorry, I missed some of the beginning of the discussion. If they're included, why would we say including? Because there must be a reason for the,
Can we just take out
yeah.
with the exception of medical diet and have it read modifications may occur as collaboratively determined?
I think that works.
I think
Because I would
I
envision
think it was
having-
carved out because there's a medical diet section.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would see, like, I know we've had kids who, for weight loss or for diabetic situations, I know that's a medical, but it's still, or allergies, they're meeting with the nurse and then they're coming up with helping that kid understand why we're modifying your diet, why these things are important. And that's the education piece. And so that also makes it very specific to the needs of that kid. Not every single youth in the facility gets to start dictating what their diet's going to be. That I think is unrealistic. But when you have a specific issue as to why that diet should go away from those kind of the general catch-all, then it creates more meaningful interaction with a doctor, a dietitian, and a nurse. Quite honestly, I'm not going to. I mean, we say facility manager, but I'm overseeing that, but I'm not in those conversations.
All right, Jordan?
I wanted to adopt the adding of the youth into that. So yeah.
All right, thank you. Did you want to add precise position? Medical? Okay, so as it stands right now with this language, we're on agreement for section E under calories to adopt everything from recommended daily calorie down to when it ends with and youth when feasible. All right, thank you guys. Isla?
Thanks, Shay. So I see that we only have 5 minutes till we break for lunch. So at this point, we can just, can we go back and just look at the modified changes for the previous section too?
$14.60, Hyla?
Yeah, just a quick review before we break. Okay, so just to reiterate, there was some suggestions to update the title, increasing the meals, hot meals to 2, increasing the service of snacks, and then increasing the consumption time for each meal. Also addressing that the meals and snacks should not be used as a disciplinary measure, and the suggestion to add that silence shall not be imposed during meals. And then as we bumped over to 1461, we had a thorough discussion on the calorie ranges, addressing that we are increasing the cap to 3,200 So the range is 2,500 to 3,200 with modifications, which will also include the youth when it is feasible. And there is also some updated language under subsection under 2, which is the 2020 to 2020 to 25 dietary guidelines of Americans. Are there any questions at this point or last comments? Yes, Helen.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Right under 1461, where it says minimum diet, if you scroll up, there's also that first paragraph also needs to be updated with the 2020, 2025 dietary guide. Yes, that's it right there. And I don't know if you want to remove the 2008 California Food Guide, because I think that was removed from the adult end.
Yeah, good point, Helen. So after the lunch break, I think we'll have to come back to 1461, the minimum diet, and then we can talk about updating some of the standards because Helen, as you mentioned, some of the ones that are reflected on the current regulations are quite outdated. And then we can look at some of the best practices currently being used and maybe update what is in the written language as well. Shay?
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. At the end of 1460, there are some questions that we need to answer at each section. So if we can maybe look at that briefly when we come back from after lunch to see if there's any impact. Amanda, do you want to show those questions? So, or we can look at them right now. I know we only have a few minutes, but when we make the changes and modifications to the revisions, we just want to also not to forget to look at these impacts and justifications as we move on, okay? So it looks like it's 2 minutes till we go. I would say we go now.
Well, you called it, Shay. Thank you. So does that mean we still get to come back at 1 or do we have to come back at 12:58?
Oh, I would say 1. How's that?
All right. Thanks, Shay. Well, we'll see you all back at 1.
Thank you, guys. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed their nutrition and I hope you guys actually got to get some nutrition on that break that we had.
I would like to say that I ate the salads that our honor farm makes and gets delivered here every day. So if I can eat the food, I think it's pretty good.
It's good to hear that. I don't think everyone has the same experience. So big ups to Slow.
Kyla, it looks like Sochi is here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome back from lunch. Hope everyone enjoyed that hour. It was for me a much needed break. So hope everyone was able to recharge. We're going to jump back into 1461, the minimum diet, at the top of that regulation. I know we kind of bounced around previously. So taking it from that first paragraph, are there any comments or suggestions for revision? Laura. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Should Helen go first?
Sorry. Yeah, Helen.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, just what I left off with before we went on lunch. Where it says 2008 California Food Guide, it's quite outdated, and I know they took it out of the adults section. I don't know if we want to also do the same here.
Thanks, Helen. And my understanding also is that after reviewing that 2008 California Food Guide, it actually directs food service providers to the DGAs anyway, so it's a little bit repetitive. Okay, thanks. Laura?
Thanks. I was going to say, I'm not sure what's referred to by the Federal Child Nutrition Meal Program. I don't know if that's the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program, but it's not a policy that I was familiar with.
Agreed. And oh,
Is that the very top line that you're referring to, Laura?
Exactly. Yep. In that first sentence.
So where it says include the federal child nutrition program, does anyone have what the current language is?
I think it would be the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program, or USDA National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. But please chime in if there is. I assume that that's what this means.
yeah, and I also have heard other providers reference CACFP as being part of the Federal Child Nutrition Meal Program as well. And so that language that's shown here is not very clear. Johnny?
Yeah, the National School Lunch Program should not be in here, because it's not based off of that guideline. Because the USDA, is what regulates the National School Lunch, which is federal, but I don't want to quote that without referencing anything that's written. I think we should look into this further, because this is before my time, and I don't even know what it's referencing from when this was created. Yeah, definitely, Federal Nutrition Meal Program. It sounds like the USDA, but I don't want to assume it's specifically that. I know there's different criterias, because this is specifically for juvenile facilities, and it could be a total separate regulation. So yeah, I think we should look into that more further.
Thanks, Johnny. Also, to a previous point that you made, departments are also able to, they can either participate in NSLP or they can choose not to. So that is optional. And I think that first line there also says that the nutritional standards, which may include the Federal Child Nutrition Meal Program. So the way I'm understanding this is actually the second line would be stronger to be the standard that food service has to comply with. So I would personally scratch that first line.
Kyla, you want the first line all deleted, just strike through?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion, but I'm open to other thoughts. Carrie?
I agree with you on that. It is referring to the USDA school breakfast program, their school lunch program, the CFCP. Those are all the USDA nutrition programs, but it's all optional. So I agree with you that the first sentence be striked, and then it's an optional one, and it's going to follow these guidelines anyway on the minimum. And the second sentence, just start with the second sentence, the minimum diet provided shall be based upon nutrition and caloric requirements found in, and then continue with that.
Is the 2011 still current for the dietary reference intake? Johnny?
I don't know about that piece, the dietary reference for that, but after reviewing it under Google, it is true that that first sentence is notating the USDA NSLP because it did come right up. So yeah, definitely strike that out. But I don't know about the 2011 dietary. I would think that's outdated, but I'm gonna take a look and research real quick.
Thank you.
Laura, you're an RD, so can you kind of speak to that as well?
Yeah, I try to keep a pretty close eye on those. So they're like different DRIs are updated at different times. So for different nutrients. So it might be most clear just to say the dietary reference intakes and not pin it on a year. So that way what's referenced will just be the most recent. They're not clearly posted with a year, so it's hard to know. I don't know. I think it's misleading.
Agreed. Thanks, Laura. So, and as I understand it too, the DJAs come out every single year with a new set of guidelines, but the DRIs kind of build off of the original one that was posted in 2011, and they just come out with kind of like supplemental documentation.
Or there's new, like in 2019, there's like a new DRI level called chronic disease risk reduction level for sodium, a CDRR level for sodium. So those were issued in 2019. So there's like different, they kind of are updated as needed and as research is available, I think, to update them. I'm not an expert on that, on the process for how those get updated. But the dietary guidelines do have like a very clear pattern for getting updated every 10 years.
Thanks, Laura.
Maybe Johnny
Johnny?
found something.
Yeah, exactly what Laura said. I looked it up and there's going to be too many revisions almost annually. So I think the 2011 strikeout is pretty accurate. So as long as we're referencing what we're supposed to be in accordance to, that's going to be fine.
So as it's drafted on the screen, are we in agreement that this is what we want to move forward with? I see head nods.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
striking the 2011. No, we'll talk.
All right, great. So then moving forward, the next section or the next part talks about facilities having a written process for how vegetarian or vegan diets may be requested and granted or denied. There was previous public comment about striking out the option to have those meals denied. Just wanted to bring that up to the group.
So we get a lot of on-demand requests just because and sometimes they fall off like the vegetarian and vegans. And it does cause a little havoc where our kitchen staff are trying to follow their diet order because even though it's not a medical diet per se, it's a more of a preference. And we have to follow, if it's been on a physician's diet order. And so we see it coming and going, just as they don't like the menu. So we I don't really care for the wording with the denied part. I think what we should just focus on as requested and just leave off the granted or the denied because it is all case by case. We do see in them the youth come in saying that they're hey, I'm vegetarian. We make the determination based off of the intake assessment, contacting parents, guardians. Then once we accommodate the vegetarian, if that's what they're claiming, the youth, then they may say, you know what, I don't like this after all. And it became a preference, of course. And now they're on a regular meal. So I've seen both ways. I don't really have too much out of the 180 youth, maybe about 5 in the facility, 3 facilities total, vegetarian or vegan. We don't really have a high amount. That's all I had a comment for that part.
Thanks, Johnny. And so your recommendation is to strike out. Okay, thanks. Laura?
Yeah, I had an overall recommendation for this introductory paragraph to consider including requirements that the meals or the diet also consider environmental sustainability, fair labor, and local economies, or some other values beyond nutrition for the meal planning.
Where within this paragraph do you think that would fit the best?
I would say after the dietary guidelines for Americans and before facilities shall have a written process. And I think it's just a little tricky, sort of like what the regulation would be and how it would be regulated. I don't
And
know.
inspect
That's
it for too. I think that's the
and
question.
exactly.
Yeah, how would you
Mhm.
actually inspect to that language, I guess is the question we want to look at.
Yeah, and so it might be beyond the scope of this regulation to have, to have that included here. I don't know. I'll but wanted to bring that up.
Thanks, Laura. Carrie?
May I suggest that language go under the 1463 under the menus, where it'd be more of the menu planning part of it? Just a suggestion.
Johnny?
I agree, but as long as we're not creating a new standard, and I'm not too familiar with what you're mentioning, if it's going to be something new and added as in, or is it just a reference we're talking about here? But yeah, adding something at this point, we got to be very careful because, I don't know too much about what you're saying, Laura. If you want to explain that a little further.
Sure, it could be something that I don't know, maybe it's beyond sort of what this work group or regulation can work through or include, but that there would be requirements or make recommendations in support of to minimize environmental impacts of the foods that are served. So, for instance, beef, for instance, is associated with high greenhouse gas emissions. So, limits on beef are good for planetary health and also are supported by research and literature that it's also good for human health, reducing uh, reducing intake of saturated fat and reducing cancer risk.
Thanks, Laura. I think too that there are some counties in California that have adopted the Center for Good Food Purchasing agreement, which is similar to what Laura is talking about. Whether or not they've implemented that program, that's still unclear. And so I'm thinking that the menus, 1463 might be a good section to kind of see how we can work that in, but I definitely hear some of those concerns and wanting to improve, I think value-based procurement, there's definitely an opportunity for that somewhere within. I think there's also some of that push within NSLP, but kind of in the weeds there. But all right, thanks, Laura. That was a great point to bring up. Well, wrapping up this first paragraph, are there any suggestions for edits to what you currently see on the screen? Oh, sorry, Meredith.
Thank you. I agree with Johnny about allowing youth to request vegetarian and vegan diets, especially since it sounds like even in a county with a large population, it's relatively small. Part of what I see in the regulation is there being a process. And so I think the intention was with granted or denied, the idea was that a youth should be informed when they've made a request, what is going to happen. So I worry a little bit about leaving it open and unsettled, whether a facility has the discretion to deny it or not, and how that's supposed to be communicated. So I guess I would favor the recommendation that we have from a few of our public comments to, just make this an option that's always available and not subject to discretion. And so I think I'm looking at Center for Juvenile and Criminal Justice and FLY both made recommendations essentially that this should be provided, upon request or whatever the language might be.
It looks like Sochi had a statement.
I'm actually seconding what Meredith said, and I'm also attaching what the FLY proposed recommendation looked like as they typed it up.
So for the language to add that you're saying that this needs to be an option, not approved or denied, as this is an option. Do you have a specific where you would like to add that language into this section?
My recommendation would be right after facilities shall have a written process of how vegetarian vegan options offered to youth should be an option or something like that.
I think that we were going to have a period at the end of it.
Laura?
Yeah, it might also work under section A, protein group, and specifying it there where the different protein foods are specified.
Yeah.
If I can ask a question before the next comments. So it sounds like we want to make this, essentially want facilities to have a written process for accommodating the youth's request. Is that right? They need to have it in place that needs to be already available and option, not that something they need to figure out how to fulfill once it's requested. Is that more the perspective?
Right. I think we've been hearing that, right, to always have it available as an option. So then maybe it could just be like religious diets, vegetarian or vegan diets must adhere to these nutrition standards.
I mean, there's a couple ways. This is Allison from BSCC. There's a couple ways to look at that. Facilities shall have a written process for how vegetarian or vegan diets may be requested, period. And then it goes into when provided. And I don't know if I heard this correctly or if I was making this up in my head. Facilities shall have vegetarian or vegan diets available, period. So just to get some language out there. And yeah, this one was added in the last regulation revision, and the add-on for granted or denied was to, I know that's not something that's being recommended, but just some history behind it because of the I'll just stop there. Just go back to the language and how you want it written up. If it should be available, requested, and then it goes into the meeting the standards.
Thanks, Allison. Marguerite?
I think I like the first part of Meredith's request and the wordsmithing there. Facilities shall have a written process for how vegetarian and vegan diets may be requested, period. I think having it offered to any youth upon request, that becomes a logistical challenge and operationally, because especially number one, if you're a small facility and you're depending on an outside source, then that could change day to day if they're saying today I want a vegan diet and and another day I don't. And I think for those that are, I'm going to leave it up to Johnny and, the people that are doing food service within their um, facilities. It's, it could, how do you handle ordering? How do you handle the waste that could come about because you're expecting this amount for this population, or the meals get ordered over here. No, I actually, ordered to over at our county jail, we can order a vegan meal. But there's a process in which we determine, is that in the best interest of the kid in that moment? Because I got to tell you, sometimes vegan is not the healthiest. There's a lot of very unhealthy vegetarians and vegans out there. And I think our job is to, it's to find out what is the best in the moment for that kid. I am extremely for having a healthy, well-balanced diet. I just think it's a, talk operationally, how can we do this offered to any youth upon request? That needs to be, I think that needs to be processed.
Thanks, Marguerite. Johnny?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's very difficult to, as it is, handle the request. If we were to offer this, that's what I'm hearing, um, as a option, it would be at what point do we say, well, you said last week you were this, and then now you're asking for a regular meal, and I feel like it can go back and forth. If we were to offer it, I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly in the comment. Vegetarian from Sochi said, and vegan options shall be offered as an option to all youth. That would be really not feasible. It could not. It would be very difficult. Instead, as long as we have the intake assessment, which is a part of the written process of how when requested for vegetarian and vegan, which is already written properly, that's why I wanted the and granted or denied, because it just doesn't sound like it's necessary to put that in there, because we're gonna grant it because we contact we say first at this point, when the youth gets in custody and says I'm a vegetarian and vegan, at that point we don't say no you're not. We say okay, we make a phone call, and the parents will say more than likely yes, that's what my son's saying. It's very uncommon that we will say, well, your mom said, no, and we're not going to do it for you because of that. That's not how it works. So I think how it's written, removing the add and granted and denied, let the youth know. We can educate the youth, and this is what the policy that we're revising is. When we educate the youth upon intake, we're informing them that we would accommodate. That is a part of your written process. So just basically having that coaching moment, informing them, because when they get here, they should be telling us. We shouldn't really be asking, but we actually have a checklist that we actually go over. Are you allergic? Or you have a religious beliefs. So it is a part of the written process for Riverside probation. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to highlight, is that if we were to offer it to all, that would be very difficult. But if we state it as it's written and we educate, that's the key. I don't think it needs to be anything further in depth. It's no different than an allergy, in my opinion. It's no different than an allergy. So that's all I have.
Johnny, this is Allison. Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. Were you saying are you saying that it's something that should be or is asked at intake? Like, so it's something that's established so that if that young person this is their diet, you can confirm it and get it on record, and then that planning can happen during their stay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first, once a youth gets in custody, they have the duty control officer, which is responsible for processing the intake, has to go through a lot of numerous things. Are you on medication and so on? So we find out early on, we get a phone call from the detention control office to the kitchen, and we listen verbally. Once the medical statement, which is signed by the physician, that has up to 72 hours, which is a confirmation that it's been approved, we still execute the order verbally. We wait for the documentation to be received by the doctor, signed off. And so in all reality, we go off of whatever the youth says right upon the intake assessment. And you can't get a hold of the parents. We still believe the youth. And then once we get a confirmation guardian or parent, and even if we didn't get the confirmation or guardian, we're going to stick with what the youth stated, because we sometimes it comes back to maybe this youth is telling us the truth. So that's how we do it, and it's been pretty successful because we have food service questions that are asked at the intake by the detention control officer, and that's a part of the process of the plan that we have.
Thanks, Johnny. Carrie?
We also have that as part of the intake, but we also have an additional process that we have not had any trouble with, where there was a particular youth that, while was staying with us, decided he was going to become vegetarian after visiting with his family, who decided to go vegetarian. So he followed the submitted request. So whenever there's a vegetarian request here, same thing here is we educate them. We find out what type of vegetarian they are, what that means, and what that'll look like for them. In the meantime, we always have legumes on stock because it's on the menu as a staple. We explain to them. We also have vegan, frozen vegan food in the freezer, and shelf stable vegan food, just in case for an initial intake or on demand. And we always keep that. So there's always able to provide the vegan meal. And then we explain to them that it may not match the meal exactly because of the substitutions, and especially at first because we have to order in the food. But we do that through the educational process of them. And then we explain to them, once the food's ordered, they'll have the vegetarian food specifically to match the menu. And so we have had a high success and zero complaints about the vegetarian requests within our facility and our written program. And that's something that people can do the meal, and they don't wait 3 weeks for the meal. We substitute it, and we have these things on hand and for preparation. Same for like religious diets. If it were halal or any other type of religious, we have it ready to go as a contingency for an intake, and that's helped us. And so the youth don't have to wait, but there is a written process for it. So just to give a viewpoint of how it works out in a facility.
Thanks, Carrie. And I see Meredith shared some draft language in the chat, and then go ahead, Meredith.
Thank you. Yes. The intent in what I was trying to write in the chat was just to make sure that if it's requested, it's granted. And it sounds like in Riverside, and Carrie, I forget your county, I apologize, that is the case. I think it was not my intent to say like at every mealtime someone can change their mind about what kind of diet they want to be on. But I don't believe it's the case that simply requesting it gets you that that meal type. It's very clear that the regulations in the past, or the current regulations, allow facilities to deny a request for a vegetarian meal. And what I think we've heard from community members and youth in facilities is that it's very important to them that that not be the case going forward. And it sounds like some counties have no problem granting that request when it's made. And so I would like to suggest that the edit be made so that it's very clear that it's not in the discretion of the county to deny that request. So that was the second sort of, I tweaked it rather than offered, if it's granted, so that it's not an open question of whether it's granted or denied. And then I think we have a suggestion from Zochi around timeliness as well.
Yeah, if I may, I just wanted to add maybe if my work group agrees to maybe add like a 24-hour turnaround or some form of time limit, because I know I worked with a young person that actually said that it took them 3 weeks for them to receive their vegan meal. So I don't know if this is something that we want to add here, so all facilities really find some form of urgency that the young person is uplifting something, they requested something, but then we're also having an appropriate turnaround for them.
Thanks, Sochi. And so for facility staff, are there reasons why it would cause that long of a delay to receive the meal? Oh, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That sounds a little interesting that 3 weeks is not acceptable. Deliveries occur sometimes 1 to 2 times in a week, and we order through several vendors and they have a lot of options. I think it was maybe a bad case. Maybe they were buying something that was not local, but yeah, I've never heard of that scenario. As we speak, my dietitian is creating a vegetarian menu, excuse me, that's based off of our current approved menus. It's a little time consuming, but we like to have that on hand, just because we want it to shadow as much as possible to our current menu. And but to go back on what you're saying, 3 weeks, I mean, a deadline, it's really how the request comes in. It needs to be reviewed and approved by a dietitian, as in for what to give them. So, because there's a lot of high sodium for processed vegan foods, and that'll keep you out of the regulations. But if you have a diet order, the order needs to be reviewed by the dietitian regardless, even if the kitchen staff, are approving and executing the actual items. But yeah, 3 weeks is not acceptable. And I actually wanted to go back what Meredith said on the second facility shall have a written process for how vegetarian and vegan diets may be requested and shall be granted to any youth upon request. I think the only edit I would like to see, possibly, if you guys all agree, is somewhere in there stating that, because it sounds like we're going to be granting upon request, and it's almost like we should probably state something regarding what the process does look like. You know, what are we looking for? Is it, hey, are you a vegan? Yes or no? Because I kind of feel like the written process is how your facility asks those questions. But if we're gonna put that granted to any youth upon request, I kind of feel like we need to go back and maybe explain the written process in at least vague terms or specific. I don't know if we want to go into detail, but what is the written process? Just asking the question.
Can
So
I'm gonna jump in. This is Allison from the BSCC. Just in hearing the conversation, one of the things, and I know we said this up front, generally regulations are performance based, and the agency comes up with a specific policy that outlines those written processes. So again, there's a balance here in the regulation, like having enough detail. For requirements so that an agency can write the process that works for them and still meets the minimum standards. So thinking about, you putting in regulation that they have a written process for how youth may request vegetarian or vegan diets, if you put a period there, if an agency, so if, as this is getting inspected, so if the agency's process is at intake, each youth is asked about their dietary preference, which shall be, incorporated in, again, not the regulation saying, but that maybe the timeline is, minimum 5 days or 2 days. The agency determines that. So think about the balance between, a minimum standard that incorporates all of these thoughts, but also gives the agency the ability to write that written process, because it's going to look a little different in each facility. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I agree with what was just said. I think we're drafting guidelines, minimum standards, so we don't want to go into so much details that it might be very restrictive for certain facilities and mandate certain things that might be difficult for some. I actually like the way it's written now, not disregarding anything that, other group members have said, but I think the statement that the facility shall have a written process for how vegetarian or vegan diets may be requested, then if for some reason the facility determines there's a need to disapprove any youth on a vegetarian or a vegan diet request, they must have justification for it. And then they would have to document that. So I think I like the way that is the way it's written as is. And I don't think we need to add any more wordings to it. It might actually cause more confusion and also difficult for an inspector to look into it and determine whether the process is being done or not. That's just my opinion.
Amanda?
Speaking specifically about denying the request kind of brings me back to our discussion in the last section about calories and potentially needing to restrict or modify those if someone's on, for example, suicide watch, or maybe someone wants to self-harm through their nutrition. There's a lot of reasons where it may not be beneficial to fulfill that request, and I think those would be far and few between. But like Helen and a few others have said, telling people that they can't deny it potentially over limits it when it's in the best interest or safety of the youth. That's my only hesitation with saying that you can't deny them. Also, based on what Johnny mentioned about there's an education portion to it, you come in, you talk to them, and maybe you tell me, maybe I think I'm a vegetarian, I don't really know what that means, and you tell me what that diet's going to look like for me while I'm here. I may not want that anymore. So do I have to withdraw that request, or do you have to formally deny it so that it's documented that way and document the reasons, like, oh, after this, youth determined she no longer wanted it. So on paper it's denied, but really I just decided it wasn't for me anymore based on what I learned about it.
Yeah. Others to respond? Meredith?
If the suggestion is to preserve the ability for the facilities to deny, what I think is a really common and like strongly held dietary approach to food among young people, I think there needs to be more process then. So if a facility decides it's not in the youth's best interest, I think as Helen was suggesting, that needs to be put in writing. We need a timeline for when the facility is going to respond to the request, and we need an opportunity for the youth to appeal, because it shouldn't just be a one-way street. If a youth says they don't want to eat meat, and the facility is going to serve them meat, there should be full process for having that heard and the youth to be able to voice their concerns.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, I'm also thinking back to some of the conversations I've had with CDCR and how they offer vegetarian and vegan diets without, well, the residents just have to request for it, and there isn't necessarily a denial that would come up from that. So I'm just wondering what the difference would be with youth and then in adults in their facilities, if anyone knows. Okay. All right, so based on some of the, oh, Johnny?
In short terms, and you know, I don't think we've ever denied a vegetarian unless we saw a trending back and forth every other 3 days. You know, it became a behavior issue, meaning they were just doing it just to cause issues. And it was at one time in my 19 years I've heard of it. But that's only one person out of all those years. We've actually said, you know what, you keep going back and forth every 3 or 4 days. It appears that you are you know, doing this to cause havoc. So that was the reason why we denied, and they never fought it. They never filed a grievance. It was actually just, it was a behavior thing. They were just making a little comments and causing us all to do extra work back and forth. So I just wanted to let you guys all know that we don't deny vegetarians in pretty much 99.9%. So, but yeah.
Thanks. So based on what's reflected on the screen now, then, are we okay with the written language that Amanda has put on the regulations, or do we want to direct our attention to some of the text in the comment box?
Just a question, highlight, do you mean, do we want to keep the comment box in what we send to the ESC, or are you saying, should we try to incorporate what's in the comment box into red lines?
Yeah, I that is what I'm asking, because I know that the comments on the side were suggested after Amanda wrote into the tracked edits on the regulation. So from the comments, there have been some references towards what's in the comment section versus what's up on the regulations right now. So I'm just trying to figure out like where we want to go with this language as it relates to the written process. Laura?
Um, should the regulation also specify that there's a process for how religious diets are requested? I mean, it seems like that's not an issue, but it feels funny to say that there's a process for one and then not for something else.
It's in another section of the regulation. There's a operational
Great.
regulation for requesting any religious accommodations, if that's
Perfect.
helpful.
That
Yeah.
great. Yeah, very helpful. That totally
Yeah.
makes sense.
And
Great.
and a really nice scaffolding of federal law that protects those rights for young people.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. So then I think that language that is in the red line works. And then for the last sentence, religious diets, I guess that's fine. No other comments from me then.
Thanks, Laura. Sochi, I saw you had a hand up.
Yeah, so I hear you say that the little box, the text box is going to be something further reviewed with the with the ESC? Or is this something that we're just moving forward with and just removing what was written in the little box?
I think that comment box was kind of just a placeholder for some of the extra comments that were coming through the chat or the suggested language for the chat. And now it's gone. So
okay.
I think if I'm understanding correctly, the work group is comfortable with what is shown on the screen with these track changes.
I'll just say, I don't think it is responsive to the input that we've gotten from the community about this, to simply have it open-ended about what happens when a youth requests these diets.
So what I think we should do is add your language, Meredith, to the comment section and to have the ESC make that determination moving forward, since we're kind of back and forth in this area right now and we can't come to a consensus. That's my recommendation.
Ms. Sochi.
Yeah, and if possible, if we can add back the comment of if it being like a timely turnaround as well. I think BSCC should be looking into and in the needs of the youth, whether if if the facilities are able to accommodate these requests in a timely manner. So what happens to one youth doesn't happen to other. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your comments on that. We will definitely bring it back to the ESC for more discussion. Okay, so moving on to the next section, this is specifically for the bigger groups, so like the macros. So first we have the protein group. Are there any comments about this section?
I did. This
Oh, yeah.
section was taken out of the adult regulations because the food managers are actually are going to go to those guidelines for what they have to provide meals. So my question is, does this actually need to be in regulation? These specific sections outlined here, or is that something that the food managers are going to go get in a different location? I'd like to hear that.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question because every detail here on all these groups is what we follow, and they are based off of the 2020-25 dietary guidelines. So I maybe I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, so Johnny, you're going to the 2025 guidelines to get this information. Isn't it redundant to have it spelled out here again? Isn't it just best, instead of you having to, you're not going to come to Title 15 to look for these guidelines. You're actually going to go to the 2025 dietary guidelines to get this information. So my question is, does it really need to be spelled out here when what you're going to utilize is those guidelines?
You know what? I actually do have two comments on that. It's extremely helpful for the food service staff, managers, supervisors that when we're meal planning and creating menus, because we're not dietitians, and they can just go and check on the 2020 or 25, and they might even know it pretty closely, but it does help with menu planning for us. So we actually save cost, where we can go find it also like them, but it's kind of one of those cheat sheets where it's more accessible. But other than that, if we were to remove it, it's not going to be an inconvenience. But I just noticed that there were some recommendations to adding to, and I don't think we can add to those guidelines, but we can make edits here. And I think that's where I saw something in regards to Brussels sprouts. I saw some recommendation about the protein group having I think it was powder. I can't recall. So we can make edits here, but we can't make edits for the actual dietary guidelines for Americans. So I'm actually in favor of keeping it here so we can actually modify this to be more detailed. So
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that the regulations are also supposed to be accessible for youth as well and others. So I think that having the written standards with as much detail as possible would be helpful, especially when there are questions and grievances being filed, so that it can help both parties who are answering those. Laura?
Yeah, I think I think it makes sense to spell it out here so that all that information's in one place. You don't have to go to another place to see what it is. And then just noting that the number of servings described here doesn't align with the highest calorie level in the dietary guidelines. So would recommend, if we are going to keep this in the recommend keeping this in the guideline in the regulation, that we increase the numbers of servings to align with the DGAs. And maybe some quality changes too. So like in terms of protein powder, unless that's like a medically required thing to list.
Thanks all. Okay, so I think we're in agreement that we want to keep these groups in the regulations. So starting with protein group, are there any comments about what you see here in this first paragraph?
Before you get into that, if I can just kind of clarify, sorry, this is Amanda. Let me turn my video on. What we're talking about in the adult regs, we still have the groups, not necessarily all of the examples any longer. So I think when we were asking if it's necessary to keep the groups, and we weren't necessarily saying, don't list out all the groups, but all of these little charts and boxes underneath, 1 cup of this, 2 to 3 ounces of that, are those examples necessary, or is it just sufficient to say protein group includes this, and then keep those examples out, such as with the adult group, so that the main information is there, but if you need to look at these other reference for more specific examples, you can do that without feeling limited to this list, because I think I heard before, sometimes this can seem limiting. And I'll share my screen, or I'll switch screens real quick to show the adult regulations, just so you all know what I'm talking about. So this is they still have the groups in there. There's just not a bunch of those charts that just take up space, but the general information is there. And anytime one of those serving sizes change, it's not something that we have to track every little ounce and cup and serving size. And then also it could potentially make facilities feel like maybe it is the current one, so I don't have to go look at those things. And our regulation revisions are never going to be super fast. So waiting on our regulations to change when maybe the 2026 to 2030 dietary guidelines are out, it's more appropriate to refer to those guidelines if ours are now out of date. So maybe just reconsider whether all of those examples are necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. So as I see on the screen, then there are examples as to the protein sources, but you're recommending that the list underneath that paragraph is removed.
If we want to be consistent with the revisions we made to the adult regulations, yes.
Okay.
I'm just taking out keeping the paragraph there, but taking out the serving sizes or something specific. Something more.
Gotcha. Marguerite?
I would agree. I think it's just a lot of extra stuff that I don't think those who are really like facility managers, supervisors need to start looking at. I think it's those that are actually preparing the food, and they should have this kind of in a different location in their menus and their all their other stuff that is specific to what they do in their kitchens. So for us, it would be, like our county jail, the Honor Farm, they have all this stuff over there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks, Marguerite. Okay, does anyone want to keep the examples that are listed at the bottom of the paragraph?
I just wanted to make a comment. If we, out of the 365 days in the year, these groups are not looked at by supervisors and managers and food service staff hardly at all. It's the dietitian's responsibility. So yeah, I'm in favor of having those extra cleaning it up and shadowing the adult regulations. But I did want to bring something up about the protein group right here. So we have youth that are in custody, wards from the court, that they're over 21 years old, and the protein for the adults is higher than the juvenile. And what we do, and I'm just throwing this out there for education here, is we serve them more protein. So we're exceeding that because we're serving to adults in our juvenile facility. So I noticed the protein is different from both regulations, and that's how we accommodate it, just in case if anybody else is having that kind of issues or challenges. That's all.
Thanks, Johnny. And how old is the oldest youth in your care?
I want to say we have only one of them that's at maybe a age of 24, 25. That's the highest age.
Thank you. And I'm looking back at the DGA calorie ranges, and it's looking like from 21 to 25, the range between sedentary and is it the active lifestyle is 2,400 to 3,000. So according to our revision, this should satisfy the needs of that 24, 25-year-old.
Yeah, but I was only specifically talking about the protein, the grams. I'm sorry for not clarifying. The grams of the protein are different, not the calories.
Gotcha. Okay. And so going into, okay, Laura.
Yeah, I would recommend having like a grams of protein per day, perhaps, instead of per week. It might be, but would be happy to hear from RDs for doing the menu planning. And the dietary reference intakes for males ages 14 to 18 years is 52 grams of protein per day. So would recommend that, or do multiply that by 7. So 52 times 7 for a grams per week. Which
Does it make sense? This really brings up a good point with, some of the young people in the SYTF facilities that are 21 to 25. And this is something that maybe we can work with some of you offline on if it makes sense to specify somewhere in the protein group. I mean, it would just take us a little while to do that research where it would say, just specify the ages or make a statement that, phew, minimums per week are specified by age group, something like that. So we could flag that and do a little bit of work on the side to figure that out, because I know that has come up, and also in our SYTF work group as well, that older young people have, that are considered adults have different needs, nutritional needs.
And something I also wanted to bring up too is, when it comes to these daily requirements, we talked about the DGAs and then the DRIs, and I think there should be some conversation about like which one would be referenced for that protein group or carbohydrates, because I'm looking at the DGAs right now, and it says like 7-ounce equivalent per day if they're reaching that 3,200 calorie limit. So just wanted to put that out there if we do have more of like a focused discussion with subject matter experts.
Yeah, I think it's I feel like menus in America are planned by ounce servings, but then nutrition analysis is done by grams. So it definitely seems like a detailed discussion to have separately.
Helen?
Yeah, just one additional thing to add to the protein is, I think this section addresses just the entree protein, because if you take a look at it, it is very low, but that's because that's not the total protein they're getting out of the meal. There are protein that they're going to get from the dairy and from the grains and so forth. So, when Laura was talking about the 52 grams of protein for a young adult male, clearly here where it allows only for 28 grams, it's going to seem very low, but they are getting protein from other sources. So just keep that in mind.
And I would just add to that there's, I think one of the public comments is to not include dairy as in the protein. And I think that is an important piece to consider, is if the protein requirements are being met partially through dairy foods, which may or may not be, I don't know if the youth are drinking their milk at every meal realistically, and then also if there's lactose intolerance, or if it's like culturally sensitive to be having milk-based protein.
Right. I don't think the dairy protein is included in this particular protein group, because this is considered like the entree protein, because dairy is a separate group, and so you have to meet the dairy requirements as well. But that total protein within the dairy would still be inclusive in your nutrient analysis for that day. Does that make sense?
Right. I think that was what I'm sorry. I think that was what I didn't articulate well, is that like, I think there's a comment below that, I think that the
Right.
dairy shouldn't be counted in that, towards meeting the protein for the day. I agree that the dairy group is a separate group, but it is contributing protein to the daily total.
I agree.
May I ask why that is?
We kind of clarify what you mean by why that is.
I mean, why would we not, and this is just from my own knowledge, if I'm asked, not that I agree or disagree, I just kind of I'm seeking to understand is, why does dairy protein that comes from dairy not included in the overall protein?
I think it should be included in the overall protein. It's just not included in the entree protein portion. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because I think Title 15 wants to ensure that the youth are getting an actual protein entree. And so that could be, the meat or the eggs or the beans or whatever. And then aside from that, they're also getting their dairies. So you don't want somebody to say, oh, I'm going to give them 2 cartons of milk and one will count as the entree protein and one will count toward the dairy. So you don't want that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Laura and Helen, for sharing that nuance. I think that for many folks, it's not known that this protein requirement is specifically for the entree. So would there be a need to include that in the paragraph that you see on screen?
The more specific, the better, because I did not know that, and a dietitian should know that when they're looking at this, but that's not clear enough. And sometimes the assumption is where we get in trouble with regulations. It's better to know and be more specific. So I'm in favor for adding that specific.
What if we just add entree in front of protein? Would that be helpful? Because you're right, Johnny, I've met other dietitians and I've done inspections where they get confused by this one as well.
Interpretation is key. And I think you said it very well. If we specifically say entree, that will help tremendously.
Helen, your suggestion was before protein. Do you mean before protein group?
Right, before protein group. So in front of the word protein, just add entree.
Thank you.